All right, here we go. 10/3/2025. I have a list of things to talk about, but I'm in the dark. I don't see my notes. What the hell's going on? Okay, so after Kirk died, even right before, I was talking about how the right was clamoring for their own martyr. I called Austin Metcalf back in the spring this white Trayvon Martin attempt. And then with Ierna Zaruski, the girl in the subway, they try to make that a George Floyd thing. That's why Elon Musk offered $1 million for a bunch of artists to each have a $10,000 grant to put a mural up. And that never happened because immediately after they started trying to make her into a martyr, a white George Floyd, White Lives Matter protests started because of the subway thing. But that got drowned out by the squib blood gushing out of St. Charlie's neck. And now nobody cared about the subway girl. Now, at the time, I pointed out the significance of Floyd and Kirk as representative of the extremes of the political spectrum, woke left, woke right, each of them having perceived oppression and a critical view, where their martyr is testament to the fact that they are indeed oppressed by their alleged oppressor. So Floyd, obviously evidence of systemic racism and whiteness as the oppressor, whereas Kirk, and if you follow any of the conspiracy theory logic, these things are all manufactured and they're all fake, but they're heavily promoted. You know, from Candace Owens on down, they're all promoting the conspiracy theory that Israel did it. Well, the Israel did it is actually a central tenet to the woke right, just as, I think that house, something's burning over there. I'm seeing this white cloud coming over the hill. I'm gonna flip my camera. What is that fog? I mean, am I gonna get gassed? I don't know if you can see it. Don't mean to get distracted. I just saw a big cloud just fly by. By the way, I watched some annoying loudmouth lefty get maced in Oregon. And someone during our talk the other night with Fakeologists said, do these psyops have real effects? And yeah, absolutely they do. People do get radicalized and they do react to these things. If it smells like mustard, run. Right. It'd be really hard to talk if my tongue was swelling. Isn't that what happens with mustard gas? Like your skin blisters and your tongue swells up? Yeah, there's a chemtrail. They got me. I actually saw it. I saw an unmarked plane, and I was like, wow, let me check my plane tracker, and it wasn't there. And then it came down here, and it squirted chemtrails all over me. Such a ridiculous theory. I'm glad we killed it. Not one former chemtrail addict has come up to me to say, thank you for eliminating that false threat, for eliminating that paranoid delusion, because I can sleep comfortably. No one says, I don't have to wear a chemtrail mask anymore thanks to you. It's like free therapy. I call this mind war inoculation. Like Infinite Plane Radio does in fact cure mind aids. But I never thought about it as like legitimate therapy for people who are afflicted with various paranoid delusions, which you get when you take red pills. Because that's what propaganda is, agitprop. The atrocity propaganda is just there to make you paranoid. And it's a delusion to believe it's real. So to continue here, I mentioned that they were going to prop up Charlie Kirk as a George Floyd. And they were going to create this 2020 scenario, but this time from the right. Like the pendulum has swung the other way. And yesterday, The Atlantic put out a piece basically saying what I just said, what I've been saying for nearly a month. They said the MAGA now has their George Floyd, and they cite all the various ways that turning Kirk into a two-dimensional character, a saint, has essentially given them all the leverage that the political left had after the atrocity propaganda involving Floyd. And both of these are heavily based on the shock value of the original footage, because everybody was shocked by Chauvin and Floyd. Everybody was shocked by Charlie Kirk. But if you know what you're looking at, then you know that George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, and Charlie Kirk are probably snorkeling at Goat Island in New Zealand when they're not chumming it up at Valhalla, some Masonic lodge. Like, that's more likely than they are dead. If you're going to assert that these characters, these martyrs, are literally dead, you have a very long list of hoax indicators that you have to deal with. And if you don't know about those hoax indicators, you haven't done due diligence. And who are you to judge, real or fake, if you're just judging it off of headlines and TV screens? Like, you're too uninformed. I made this distinction when we were talking to Fakeologist and CSL about how we don't say everything's fake. You know, we do have a great deal of nuance in this. There's no dogma here. This is 100% falsifiable. So I would ask those who believe the things to be true, what would it take for you to consider it false? And if nothing can convince you it's false, short of the media itself telling on itself, then your model's unfalsifiable. And you can just essentially sit this one out. Like, you're not in a position to form an opinion that can weigh against informed disbelief. I mean, this is all about more information. The other day, someone had asked me, are the Amish considered off-world stage? And I said, by no means are they off-world stage. You don't get off the world stage by not watching the news or not paying attention to the media. You're born on the world stage. You have to be deliberately, actively, volitionally deprogrammed. And what that means is you have to at least be able to recognize it and define it. And of course, that's not really an insight that most people have, because there's this base presumption that the mainstream media is a window to the world. Even if it's got a bias, it's essentially real. Well, it's actually worse than we can describe. I mean, because how do you measure the cumulative effect of many decades of influence operation and psyop infused news cycles? The fake absolutely permeates the real. And another thing someone had brought up, they said, why can't we just say everything's fake? Well, because that's a generalization fallacy. And if you want to be taken seriously and you want to assert to someone who buys into the mainstream that you have a point, you have to get into the weeds and force the burden of proof back where it belongs. There's no reason to be a media advocate. Intelligent counterspell, come to think of it, can we name one event that was real? Well, the thing is, we have to be very specific, like these various events are real, but they're not real in the usual sense. So we have to be very, like, for example, when that AA flight hit the helicopter, you know, I immediately said, let's look for, and we found it all, drills, concurrent programming, and all the rest. But I had immediately said, yeah, it's real in the sense that it's a simulation. They did a drill. Like, it's just kind of like the entire world stage is so reality compromised, and it has this assumed superiority. The people who are part of it, they just assume that they are correct, and that the conspiracy theorists are, and the conspiracy theorists, to be honest, they're set up to take the fall. If you watch the dynamics here, they're made to look foolish and crazy. That's why I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Jamarian says, where can we get a coffee table book on PSYOPs? Interesting idea. The thing about PSYOPs is that that word was mainstreamed thanks to the Pentagon and Taylor Swift. But everybody can point out a psyop. Everybody can say fake. The difficult thing is putting it together in the bigger picture. Where does this, because psyops are not anomalous. And, we've been talking about this snake eyes thing, how it's gone mainstream, but nobody is talking about the Hulu Tempest. And there's a reason why. They're obviously flooding the zone with snake eyes stuff, with deliberate mistakes put in there. The September 10th thing was a deliberate mistake. I saw that coming. I said, watch them play on this ambiguity, and they'll harp on that one point to discredit the whole idea that 27 years ago, the movie Snake Eyes foreshadowed Charlie Kirk's assassination. Well, that is being talked about extensively, even mainstream news picking it up. However, nobody's talking about the Tempest, which has far more points of connection and is far more synchronized with the present news cycles in a way that should be recognized as mind-blowingly uncanny and impossible. Like, how do we have the story of Charlie and Erica Kirk on Hulu right now that kicked off on the day that the event happened? The reason they don't want to focus on that is that it gives away the game. They can talk about predictive programming and dismiss it and call you crazy, but they can't discuss the entrainment that is nonstop. The Hulu thing is not an exception. Like, my mind wasn't blown. I'm like, oh, business as usual. I was expecting it. I said, watch, there's going to be something that's tracking with this. And there always is. And it goes back to the Kennedy assassination. It goes back to RFK. We can point to so many events, 9/11. And it's not just the entertainment stuff. You got to look at the drills that happen concurrent with these events. So the whole world stage, which is a presentation of the world that the consensus accepts as real, is not 100% fake, but all of the major historic events are staged. Find me an exception. If you have an exception, like I always tell people, if you can find me one school shooting that was real, please let me know. And in all likelihood, if you can find one, it's not going to be anything like the ones that are fake. It's not going to have the laughing actors, the water bottles, the drills. It's not going to have any of the incongruities or the deviations from protocol that we always look for. And there's plenty with the Charlie thing, which, you have Ian Carroll and Candace Owens and a few others in their magic mystery van, smoking who knows what, driving around looking for the second shooter, third shooter, fourth shooter. Who shot Charlie? They're just driving around, piling up their various conspiracy theories. Next, it's going to be the shooter is the cameraman, and it's in the camera. But none of them can even get into the subject of media fakery or squibs. Like, squibs has got to be a banned word. I know they must have had some kind of a conversation with Candace Owens and others. Do not say squib. If somebody super chats you and they ask about squibs, ignore it. But they can safely take a topic like Snake Eyes and laugh it off, like Nick Fuentes did. But he could not confront Hulu's The Tempest in the same way. So I'm glad this event happened as it has. It's given us some great ammunition and leverage to make our points, because it was so easy for people to dismiss what I'm talking about is actually a major part of the structure of media itself. Thank you for that. Let's go. Air for the raft. I don't think we're oversaturated with Kirk. I think, and if you're sick of hearing about it, then you're underestimating how significant it is. Because one, this is one of the best examples of not only a live psyop kayfabe that has all the hallmarks of a templated, pre-scripted event, but it has the predictive programming elements, and it has this out of control, growing number of people calling it fake. Like, this is a massive opportunity. Like, I'm not in this for the entertainment value. I don't get bored. And what's more, this event was written 27 plus years ago. We can prove that with the predictive programming. And if you don't think predictive programming is evidence that the event itself was scripted long in advance, then you don't have an explanation for it that makes any sense. It's just the logical flow of events. It would have to proceed. The psychological operation that's going to be grafted onto our history would have to have been written first. And then the clues, the hints, the mirroring of it could be fed to different platforms, books, video games, and movies to be incorporated. This makes a lot more sense when you look at the voluminous predictive programming for 9/11 leading up to it. So they have the basic script, and then they went with, and it's always the repeated themes and numbers and symbols. There's a consistency here. But what I'm trying to get at here, and this is what's being hidden, is that what we think of as news is a presentation of our history as the consensus agree. It's history as agreed upon lies, what Napoleon Bonaparte said. History is lies agreed upon. So we all agree on this, move on to the next day and the next day. So we're looking at an engineered event written decades ago. And that it was, and Candace Owens today compared it to the JFK thing. I'm telling you, this is meant to be, in terms of its cultural and political significance, it's meant to be the JFK for this particular generation. They love I call them generational psyops. Like 9/11, they're like, oh, 9/11's our Pearl Harbor. Well, they had that Pearl Harbor movie with all the right themes and planes crashing and patriotism right before. So that when you watch 9/11, you could understand the comparison to Pearl Harbor. So this is a long-term agenda of scripting our... It's called history bending. We talk about news benders. They write the news 5 years in advance. Yeah, and I've been saying, yeah, that's a conservative estimate. They're history bending. It is the history benders. But I'm just saying, we can demonstrate this. This is the model. This is what they do. We can demonstrate it. We do every day. And a lot of people are distracted by conspiracy candy and rabbit trails designed to prevent you from coming up upon this particular revelation here. They don't want you to know this. So they have a lot, like huge channels pushing theories that are interesting, like Tartaria, like, oh, the history books are lying to us. Like, going back past 200 years, you can't verify anything. So they're looking back centuries ago to say it's all fake. But I'm saying that's conjecture, and you're going to be competing with mainstream archaeology, mainstream historians. Good luck. What we're doing right now is directly confronting the liars real time as they manufacture those lies. And this is where it gets interesting, because just today, and I think this was recorded yesterday, on Charlie Kirk's show, it was being hosted by Jack Posobiec and Tim Pool and a couple of others. And right now, you know what they're doing? They're reacting to us. And I don't think I'm exaggerating here. Like, they're not reacting to the conspiracy theories, because those guys are safely contained. The people looking for second shooters or blaming Israel, yeah, they're in a box. They're not a threat to the system. They don't question the integrity of the mainstream whatsoever. So here I see Tim Pool and Jack Posobiec and others, and they're now talking about predictive programming and concurrent programming. Not using those terms, but suddenly they're trying to get ahead of it. So you got Tim Pool talking about Utopia that came out before 2020 and completely mirrored 2020 in so many ways. And they're talking about some other show called Savant. And they said Savant had some kind of connection to the Groyper theory, that the Groyper shot Charlie Kirk. So they're up there talking about it, acting kind of like they're doing damage control. Honestly, it sounds desperate. But they don't want this conversation of the relationship between entertainment and real events to be recognized for what it is, because these are indications of fake events, because life doesn't follow Netflix. Fake events follow Netflix. Psyops follow Netflix, and psyops are not real life. And the people who think it's real life still think they saw a snuff film and not a magic show. No, it was a magic show, not a snuff film. And it's always been a magic show. Copaesthetic says The Atlantic is doing it again. Jane Goodall and Chimp Lady on the recent article. Yeah, I see her in memes. I saw she just passed. Jamarian says they even wrote a book called The Fourth Turning. Right, I've seen that. And by the way, I mentioned Jack Posobiec. He was the one who was at the Charlie Kirk event, rather, the Charlie Kirk Memorial. And he said, 100 years from now, historians are going to look back at the turning point, that the sacrifice of Charlie Kirk was the turning point that saved Western civilization. And this ties deeply in to the Turner Diaries narrative, which I said is the very reason why Turning Point was called Turning Point. But if you catch the meaning there, he said it was a sacrifice, making it like a Christ thing. That wasn't a sacrifice. He was answering a question in his, these political debates. He was answering a question, and he took the bullet. It wasn't a sacrifice. If anything, if it was real, it was stupidity, because he went against his security's wishes. He claims, leading up to his death, he claims, there were all kinds of death threats every day. So it's like, okay, if you really believe you're going to get shot, would you drop your security? By the way, Steven Crowder's out there cosplaying as a dangerous truth teller whose words are so dangerous he might get shot. And he's putting on his bulletproof vest. He's posing with all of his security guards, acting like he's some kind of a hero, like posturing. It's totally a LARP. I'm like, who really cares about Steven Crowder enough to shoot him? Nobody. Maybe his ex. Do you see that doorbell video where she was like 8 months pregnant. She's about to give birth. And he's like, no, you can't use the car. I'm going to the gym with my friends. And then he goes on these tirades afterwards about how divorce should be illegal. Another one of these individuals, these are all plants. If you don't know who Steven Crowder is, he was basically kind of like Alex Stein. Alex Stein kind of replaced Steven Crowder. And that's because Steven Crowder is no longer emotionally arrested. You have to have like extended adolescence, arrested emotional development to do what these comedian right-wing trolls do. But I thought it was interesting to see Jack Posobiec up there talking about saving Western civilization, that this is some major turning point in history. And it's because he knows it is. Because what I've said before, when I brought up Turner Diaries, the whole point of it is, I said Turning Point USA was platforming the political organization that would execute the Turner Diaries. And the Turner Diaries is the basic theme of it is white nationalists versus the New World Order. A white nationalist pushing back against everybody, but getting terroristic about it. And the book Turner Diaries, authored by a guy born on 9/11, inspired McVeigh. And you have to look at the significance of McVeigh and Waco, Alex Jones and Waco, and the whole gun grab story. This has all been a story, is what I'm saying. And there are indicators all across the way. Like, I don't get into gematria or numerology because a lot of that is just noise deliberately put there. They want to skew the signal to noise ratio so nobody can figure out what's going on. And they make it very easy to run down rabbit trails. Like, what's with all these numbers? What do they mean? It's like, forget trying to interpret what they mean. Just recognize that they are present. And that should be enough to establish a pattern. And yeah, there is indeed a pattern. And there is indeed code. Just as there are themes and narratives and archetypes. The theater of Psywar has it all. Oh, Crowder was Canadian? I didn't know that. Like that Canadian rapper, what's his name? Tom McDonald. So I see Tom McDonald, he's rapping Dear Charlie, if you're in heaven, can you see us? Dear Charlie. It's just, the guy is I don't know if he gets paid to do this, to humiliate himself, but he's basically this MAGA rapper. But he's coming at it from such a blue pill direction, so he's crying and weeping for Charlie. It's like his third Charlie rap. It's like, Charlie's not dead. Kind of invalidates your whole shtick. But he's a comedian. He's kind of a comedian. He's a rapper, but he's a Canadian. So you got this Canadian rapper waving an American flag trying to fight the fight of the American nationalists. It's like, what are you doing? Yeah, cringe rap. Ollie Goering says they're not saving the West, they're controlling the demo instead. Yeah, control demolition. They're 9/11ing the West. Yeah, they are. Now, if you look at, like I said, look at the history with the fictional events that have brought us to where we are. They've communicated in metaphors. Like, so the sinking of the Titanic, which had predicted programming, probably a big fat hoax. The sinking of the Titanic has been used as a metaphor for the West. And it's been correlated in their psyops, in their dramas, with the sinking of the Twin Towers. And I can explain that in a number of ways, but one of the big keys would be the role of James Cameron and the literal Titanic wreckage, which is where he was at on 9/11. Highly significant given his films like Titanic, which had 9/11 foreshadowing, Terminator 2, same thing. But it's all about stories, what's been communicated in these stories, in the entertainment that are used to color the psyops. It's kind of what they do. I call it psyop reinforcement content. But they can get you to agree to a premise, to hate a villain, or root for a certain hero or an underdog. They can sell you the narratives before the psyop happens. Lately, I've been calling predictive programming product placement for future fake events. So when it comes to advertising, you need to be hit with an ad so many times before you buy it. And so what they're doing with the predictive stuff is they're pre-selling you on the psyop. And it works. You may not remember every detail of every movie that you see when you think about it, but it can be jogged by association. It's pretty powerful. When you look at how somebody will see something and say, whoa, this was exactly what happened in Machete 13 years ago. A terrible movie, yet these scenes get recalled. And I think this is partially the misinformation effect. Like, I think they're using media to program us and to even screw with our memories. So the mainstream version of history, as depicted by the news, does represent a collective memory that everyone agrees things happen this way. I mean, except for those of us who don't agree. But we're very few compared to the main body of believers. And they're able to manipulate that perception en masse. Going through your comments. Bach Precision says Canadians are more entertained by American politics and news than their own. That could be it. You know, America, isn't it? Who was it? Was it Salty Siren? She said America is an anagram for eye camera. This idea that, okay, so America being this experiment. Like, so if you look at let's talk about Metascript, the big story. Go back to 1776, and there's some fascinating connections when you go into the dollar bill, the pyramid, and the Tower of Babel. So there is a subtext where America is Babylon, and that the tower is going to be WTC 7, and that we've been prepared for it in various ways. So one of the big reveals on this whole thing of Metascript, I think, was given away by Francis Ford Coppola in his latest movie, Megalopolis, which was like basically Magalopolis, Magalon. It was Make Rome Great Again. It was obviously based on Trump. It even had concurrent programming for the Trump shooting built into it, where the Trump character is shot. An assassination attempt, he survives. But at the very beginning of the movie, the narrator is describing how, you know, empires don't fall overnight, that there are a series of events and sequences that occur, but that it's like this slower process, but it's essentially in stages and told in big strokes. And so, like, I'm saying that what we're seeing is the slow motion fall of the Tower of Babel, the sinking of the Titanic, the pulling of the Twin Towers. All this stuff is all symbolic. The One World Trade Tower is 1,776 feet high, and that correlates with the 1776 pyramid, which correlates with the biblical lore 1776 AL, which is when the Tower of Babel's construction begins 120 years after the flood. And this is just lore. I'm not saying I believe this. This is not what biblical scholars likely cite, but we're talking about the Masonic lore, the Masonic Year of Light. So like when America was founded, it was 5776 to their calendar. So therefore, if you're looking at 1776 AD on that calendar, in a way, you're just kind of looking at, okay, they're kind of insinuating that the starting of America is the building of this tower. So what is the tower? And I think it's symbolic. The one world tower represents this one world paradigm, and they've achieved it. Like, I think the space program and all these things, it's all been about synchronizing a worldview that supersedes all the previous ones, and none of the previous ones can compete. Because our modern worldview, which is tantamount to our religion, has miracles that have outpaced all the past religions. Space has replaced heaven. But as far as how does the Tower of Babel actually fall? Like, what does the process of it falling look like? And I think that's kind of what we're living through as we speak. I really think it's tied to the idea of the International Space Station, which represents a union of all the nations in this mission from Earth to the heavens. Man's incursion into God's turf. Like, I think that's kind of where we're at. And I think it's the largest cathedral in the world, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York. It has these pillars that have the destruction of New York as Babylon. So this has been written into the script for a long time. And in Francis Ford Coppola's movie, it has this Russian satellite falling to Earth, and it basically 9/11's New York. It just craters it. And the movie ends where this Trump-esque character releases a new Pledge of Allegiance. But instead of Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of America, it's Pledge of Allegiance to humanity. So after this cataclysm, there's this one world built out of it. And that movie was supposed to come out pre-9/11, but he said after 9/11 it would have been redundant. So I don't know if he didn't make it on time, but regardless, he puts it out. We're talking about Francis Ford Coppola, Megalopolis, and it actually has footage from 9/11 2001 in the film. What's up, Scrapper Bob? Here is your blue wrench. Anyway, the reason I got on here, I really wanted to emphasize that, yes, Tim Pool, Jack Posobiec, and Charlie Kirk's podcast, they're trying to do damage control for us. Because nobody else is talking about concurrent programming. A lot of people will reference the predictive stuff and they mystify it. They call it synchronicity. They call it simulation. And they're confused. They're not up to speed. And what they're trying to do is diffuse the conversation, because what it gives away is, like I'm saying, this is part of the media infrastructure. They can't change it. Once you see it, you won't unsee it. Once you take away the presupposition that the news is just filling you in for your own edification, once you realize that they're actually not informing you, but they're conforming you, then I think it becomes clearer. So as a rule, and this is axiomatic, and this was, again, demonstrated quite clearly with this Charlie Kirk thing, and I put all this in my book, Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed, which came out the day after 9/11, right on time for this Charlie Kirk thing. But here's what I'm pointing out, and this is just, this is not conspiracy theory, this is not conjecture, this is what is really happening. As the mass media, and this is global, because there's global complicity in this. It's not just America. There's global complicity in these fake events that get grafted onto our collective history. So as they roll out the big events that, like these turning points, these plot twists, these big events that essentially shock the collective paradigm into accepting a new premise and moving us in a new direction. Like after 9/11, we were in the post 9/11 world of terrorism, where now nothing was safe. Oh, now we're post COVID. So these are like, you can look at these as updates to our operating system. Like you update your iPhone. Well, they update our worldview once in a while. So in the last 5 years, they've added things that didn't exist before. Like space junk is a regular thing. I just saw some space junk on the news earlier. The climate change thing is kind of a slow-burning, long-term thing they added onto our history. And all they have to do is say, okay, in 50 years, these will be the conditions, and we will manufacture the news to make it so. Like William Randolph Hearst said, you supply the photos, I supply the war. Well, you got climate scientists who can supply the models, and then it can be reported on, and then it exists. The collective believes things into existence. Not in literal ways, but in ways that they're treated as real. You could call them hyperstitions. So we're flooded with hyperstitions. But what is happening consistently, and this is what we're talking about here, is they plan an event, let's say 20 years in advance, 10 years in advance. They soften up the target demographic to accept it in advance through the entertainment. So whenever you have some major transformative psychological operation, look at the same time period, what was on the minds of the public as far as the entertainment, what was in the books, what was in the music, what was on the movies, the masses were consuming. And these masses are the same ones who are being hit with the psyop. So if you think about it, on September the 10th, how many millions of people saw a leader of a youth Christian conservative contingent getting shot on the left side of the throat with blood gushing out? How many people saw that on September 10th? It wasn't just the people watching Charlie Kirk. It was anybody watching Disney Hulu's show, the South Korean spy thriller, The Tempest. And is that a lot of people? Well, it was the #1 show in Japan. It was the #1 show in Taiwan. It was the #1 show in South Korea. And it ranked highly across the world. So many more millions and millions of people saw the exact same thing as fiction, as saw the real thing. And so I'm talking about the saturation of the collective, like painting the zeitgeist, painting our collective backdrop, steering discourse. Deprogram Truth says that was your best guest appearance. Oh yeah, by the way, CSL, the co-host for Fakeologist, he was the one who had the mod status at Reddit for auto hoax, and he transferred it over to me. So on reddit.com/auto hoax, we have a subreddit. And right now it automatically imports whatever I post on my blog. So it hasn't been dead, but now I'm actively using it. But last night it was very productive. We had a lot to catch up on, and Fakeologist and I are likely going to do a weekly thing. Because, this is advancing. Conspiracy theorists have been running down rabbit trails, well-worn rabbit trails, consuming stale breadcrumbs left for them. They've been chasing red herrings. They've been fed a steady diet of red pills and hopium. They're basically in a pen, like a big sheep pen. And they're not going anywhere. They're just literally running in circles. So like I seen this meme today, and it's like this rabbit hole, and at the bottom it has that meme, the very offensive meme, the stereotype of the Jewish merchant, and it says at the bottom of all the conspiracy rabbit holes is this. And I'm like, that is where the conspiracy rabbit holes do lead. But these conspiracy theories are all planted by controlled opposition. And if you look at where that rabbit hole is, it is firmly within the parameters of the world stage. It's not off world stage. It's totally contained. Let's see here. Ollie Goering says Reddit stonks are apparently tanking. Yeah, I just think it's good for SEO. You know, we need to get our foothold in all these various places, because there is something happening here. Like, so we're not running in circles with these conspiracy people. You know, we're not on some carousel. We're not taking any of their narratives at face value anymore. There's a lot of people noticing squibs. And I've even seen a lot of similar types, like not specifically, quote, auto hoaxers, but like, for example, people calling themselves media forensics, or I've seen a few other terms, but basically there are a lot of content creators doing what we do, even though they may not be completely at the same place. They're close enough to grasp the metascript concept. And that's the basis for the off-world stage that we need to get on. Nicotrama says, last night I spent 20 trying to get a yes or a no, but I can't. No, you can't say everything's fake, because that's not true. You can say everything's fake, and they'll say, well, the Super Bowl wasn't fake. I mean, you could say it's rigged, or, I mean, just name an event. So there's protests going on, the George Floyd thing. The protests happened. So we can't, so yeah, the basis for it was fake, largely staged, largely instigated. January 6th, was it fake? Well, it was staged. Ashley Babbitt wasn't dead. But we have to get into the weeds here. Like, for example, did anybody go to jail for it? Name one big event that was real. Good. Well, that's a valid point. And the reason why we took this stance is that we have yet to be proven wrong on any of these things. But you can't say everything's fake as a methodology. It may turn out that everything's fake, but if you approach it with everything's fake, then you have a low information take. So, like, let's say the nightly news reports a big psyop tonight. If I say, oh, it's fake, okay, that's a low info claim, and it has the same weight as saying it's real because it's on the screen. You don't have enough information to say it's fake, so on what authority? Now, you can say, past precedent, it's likely fake, the media is a pathological liar, and you would likely be right, and you would win all the bets. But that's not the process. You know, it's due process. You know, you might have somebody on film committing a crime, but they're not guilty. There's a presumption of innocence. There's a process that has to be reached. And so the process of convicting the news on a lie might require more than just basing it on the fact that they're liars. But the process is important, because here's what's different. Here's the thing. If you're just calling it shooting from the hip real time and you're not processing it, that's actually passive news consumption. And skepticism is active news consumption. The active part means you have to suspend judgment. So when the Kirk thing happened, a lot of people thought it was real, even people that I think are on our side. And I'm like, I don't know, it looks real, it looks ghastly. It's terrible if real. But I didn't just say it was fake and stand on that, because you can't. And if you try to, they will make you, I mean, you will not be able to make your case. And I'm trying to maintain a consistency here. So I will not indulge in a logical fallacy. So, like, the word fake is also problematic, because a mainstreamer hears the word fake and they think political bias. Alternative thinkers think fake and they think simulation or false flag. I say fake and I mean simulated event, performed and presented as real, a movie, propaganda. So we can't say everything's fake, because the word fake has been co-opted by Donald Trump. Well, no, you are right. So looking back, and this is why I say to anyone, if you can find one school shooting that was real, raise your hand, because the chances are you won't be able to. Nobody's done it yet. Nobody has managed to counter one of our stories, or one of the stories we've analyzed, and say, no, you guys had it wrong. This one was actually real. Here's the proof. That has never happened. But we're the ones who are doing, like, we're a fake news wood chipper. We are processing this stuff. And the process is, since we're taking the stance that we're active, not passive consumers of news, we have to maintain that objectivity of let's wait 33 hours before we call it fake. And you know what else that does? Is it gives time for the truther bait to be sussed out. You can find the false leads and you can get rid of them. You can get rid of the false leads, the planted explanations they put there, so you run with it and they can counter you later. So you give time for that to happen as well. Homeless incel Jesus says IP2 welcomes IPS. I don't think Jesus was an incel. He was a volcel, like Nick Fuentes. Voluntarily. Nick Fuentes talked about predictive programming with snake eyes, and he laughed it off and brought up reptilians and time machines. No way could he confront concurrent stuff. How in the know are these people? How insulated are they? Like, I'm convinced that Laura Loomer and Candace Owens must be in the know. And you can actually logically deduce this by looking at what they're associated with. Narratives, psyops, the people. And it's highly unlikely that some of these individuals who are so highly placed are unaware of how this thing works. That might account for their smugness a lot of the times. Their duper's delight. But Nicotramus raises a good point. He raises a good point. Now, when I say that only a small percentage of the news is fake, I'm saying that's true. Because, like, the large percentage of news is just regular mundane stuff. Like, oh, the sky's blue. This musician is touring. This person said that. The usual stuff, the fluff, the reinforcement, the worldview reinforcement, generic stories. Yeah, a lot of it is real. But it's the fake stuff that takes the stage and diverts everyone's attention. So the fake steers the real, and then it creates this cycle where all of the real news and real reporters and real journalists are writing about the fake stuff as though it's real. So I cited that Atlantic piece about Charlie Kirk and George Floyd being these parallel martyrs. Well, we both know, those of us here know, we know that Floyd and Kirk aren't dead. They're probably besties behind the scenes. So the person writing the story does not know that. So he's operating on the premise that it's real. So now what do we make of that story? It's completely divorced from objective reality. And we know this because we are off-world stage and we have the perspective to see it for what it is. But that author has no clue. He'd be completely outside of that circle there. He wouldn't have any insight. So he's looking at it as an outsider. So that's what I'm pointing out, is that the real journalists are reality compromised because they don't know real from fake and they treat all the fake stuff as real. So when you look at it from that perspective, to get back to what Nicotramus raised, the cycle of the fake being reinforced by the real people and then building on that and informing people's worldviews, the fake permeates the real. It dominates it. We live in a compromised reality. It's like a cult. Like, do you think that, cult members living in a bunker for 10 years or Scientologists out on some big cruise ship for 15 years, you think that they live in the same world that we do? No. They have an entirely different frame, a different set of presuppositions about the world and how it works. This is worldview warfare. The Psy-War. And that's what I'm pointing out here with the world stage. The world stage is the total universe of ideas that are promoted by this monolithic media control and all of its believers. And you can consider all of them to have been subdued. They've been mentally subdued. They've already been conquered. There's no resistance. InfoWars is like, you guys are the resistance. No, you are actually the controlled opposition. And this is another point that I think we have to also start raising here. The controlled opposition isn't 5 or 6 people. It's not a few dozen planted loudmouths with big platforms. It's not Alex Jones. It's not Candace Owens. It's not Nick Fuentes. They're not the controlled opposition. Alternative media is the controlled opposition. All of it. All the participants, all the believers. To the extent that you were in that realm, you were controlled opposition. To what? To the mainstream. Because what is the mainstream to the truther? It's the opposition. And they know it's controlled. So if you can accept the premise that the mainstream is controlled and it's opposed to you as a truther, then the mainstream is controlled opposition. In other words, both sides are antagonistic to one another and both sides are controlled. The term is essentially meaningless. If you're on the world stage, if you're contained within the political horseshoe, you are the controlled opposition that you think you're fighting or trying to elude. We are the uncontrolled opposition. Not even opposition. We're like uncontrolled, ivory tower, conscientious objectors, inactivists, just observing from afar, completely dispassionate. Like, I'm not triggered by any of this stuff. Resist ants, exactly. You are the resistance. It's like, what are you going to do? Like, this is incontestable. You can't fight it. You can't resist it. The idea of gathering the truthers to wake up everyone else, that's wokeism at its worst. And the thing that I came to realize this year, and I have diagrams on this, I have mind maps on this, like, this is true. The red pill ideology is a subset of J pill, which means that red pill leads you to woke right, the mirror of woke left. That is the ultimate destination. I wouldn't go there. Nicotrama says, yeah, 1,000,000% you can't fight this thing. No, here's what we can do. We can, and like, I don't believe in like, let's get the normies and wake them up. No, I don't think so. I think it makes more sense economically and strategically to only reach out to those who've done 80% of the effort themselves. So if they've made it 80% of the way out of Trutherville, yeah, we'll extend a hand. Get them over the bloody guardrail. If they can get over the bloody guardrail, they can go off-world stage. If they can talk about squibs and Charlie not being dead, they're ready for this. Then they can see the script, the meta script, and the world stage for what it is. But if they haven't gone that far, if they haven't made it past mainstream and past alternative, there's no point in reaching out to them. And what we can do is aggregate with those who have. Hemorrhage Trutherville subscribers, have a breakaway, a schism. Essentially, we're looking at this as one way to look at this is we're approaching the world state church as atheists. But the world state church essentially is media with its God constructs and its myths and its martyrs. And we're deconstructing it as though we were looking at it, objectively, with reason and logic. Dejor Vision says, hello from Spain. Thank you for joining. Going through your comments, see if I've missed anything. Okay, so what I've been saying for some time here is that there's going to be eventually there's going to be some kind of a confrontation between off-world stage and the world stage. I've said at some point, there's going to be a turning point, where the off-world stagers, where our raft hits the shores, and we engage in the system itself as a third branch of media, not alternative. And our targets are the big influencers in alternative media. Not that we're trying to change their minds, but we just need to expose the guardrails they defend. What lines will they not cross? And if they won't say squib, they're controlled. They're not investigating, and they're not researching. They're dropping breadcrumbs. They don't have original thoughts. Everything they're putting out there is targeted misinfo. But I think that time is about now, because here we are deconstructing this Charlie thing, networking with others who figured it out, pointing out that, hey, notice that none of the big conspiracy theorists that get all the attention will even address the idea of fakery. They all start on the false premise that he's dead. So we're trying to create this fracture between those who can see and those who just still follow these big channels that are promoting recycled scripts. I mean, they're recycling JFK all over again. But that confrontation's happening now if we got Tim Pool and Jack Posobiec on Kirk's show trying to take away the conversation about concurrent and predictive programming, trying to make it make sense without going into the news is fake. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to suggest that it's leftists in Hollywood influencing people to go with narratives. They're trying to guardrail it. We're watching this in real-time damage control for what we do. They're not trying to damage control the people who are confused about snake eyes. Those people are controlled. They're not trying to damage control the second shooter conspiracy theorists. Candace Owens, again, she's not doing damage. She's a propagandist doing what they're supposed to do, which is be the manufactured alternative to the mainstream. So when people don't like the mainstream, they have somewhere to go, but they don't leave entirely. Well, we've left. We've stepped out of their thing, out of their whole fake paradigm, but we didn't cease paying attention to it. See, the people who are on it by default are misinformed. The basic starting point, the basic point of view, and this includes AI. ChatGPT is misinformed because everything you say to ChatGPT is going to come back to you through the frame established by mainstream mediation, just like it will with all your normie friends. Here is your wrench. Altrusian Grace Media says, thanks IPS for being a bastion of sanity, questioning, and critical thought amidst the conspiratainment puppet show. Yeah, exactly. So we're pointing out the puppet show, not to change them because they won't change, but to expose the fact that they won't change. We need to expose the guardrailers as such. And then what happens next is, you can look at them as subscriber piñatas. Their disaffected subscribers will need somewhere to go. Where can I go where my perceptions will not be ignored, where I won't be called a bad person for not believing the alternative news? Because you're already chastised for not believing the mainstream. Then you become a conspiracy theorist. But if you don't go with the conspiracy theory of the day, lockstep, then you're outgrouped. Auto hoaxers were outgrouped. We don't have a platform. The IPS is the platform for this. The Infinite Plane Society became the platform for this perspective that always takes into account the systemic fakery. But over time, we came to realize that this systemic fakery is adding up, and it's bending history itself. And what we can demonstrate here, and again, this isn't mud flood conjecture, we can demonstrate that the transformative psychological operations, the major historic events, have all been staged, written decades in advance. And you can demonstrate it. There's a method that they employ. And the terminology that we use is stuff that we've had to come up with to explain what we've been seeing, because they don't give you the tools to break out of their Truman Show, the cognitive tools. We have the cognitive tools, and they're trying to avoid it. So they got their biggest names in alt-right media trying to do damage control for what we are opening up here, this big can of worms. But as far as can we stop it? No. But we can gather all those who've seen through it enough to form a self-aware demographic of media observers, analysts, and consumers who are sane and have a different approach. And what's the point of it? Well, what's the point of it? You get to avoid emotional manipulation. You get to avoid wasting money on GoFundMe. You cease to finance psychological warfare. You cease being misinformed and you become one of the informed. I guess it's situational awareness. Like, you're not off the grid. Like, you know the idea of going off the grid. Like, I'm going to go get my own land, dig a big hole, get a bunker, and sit in there with my AR-15, my ammo, my MREs, and my Bible, and all 17 seasons of Friends. Like, you're not off the grid because you're essentially your own prison warden in your own private FEMA camp because you're scared of emergency situations that are all fake. You're a prisoner. You're not off the grid. I'm off the grid. You don't get off the grid if you're not off the world stage. An off-world stage didn't exist until we created this platform. There is not an off-world stage perspective. So I brought up ChatGPT. Its perspective is world stage. It presumes everything in the news up to now has been more or less fundamentally real, and it doesn't account for the bending, the long-term effects, nor the daily systemic manipulation of mass perception. It does not account for it. So off-world stage does. Nicotrauma says you get to avoid insane amounts of money prepping. Yes. And something that I'm planning on next, what I think will occur organically here, is the more that I reach out and do interviews, like I want to send out copies of the new book, handbook for the recently deprogrammed, to various content creators and just get them on the podcast and interview and live streams. And we need a network because there are enough, based on this Charlie thing, there are enough that we can form something of a pushback. So the way that this demographic, which is separate from alt media, becomes self-aware is it has to be defined. It has to be called out. It has to be opposed. They can ignore us, and it's safe to ignore us. Like the last thing that they would want, those who are operators within the MSM Plus media ecosystem, the last thing they want is for these true skeptics to be treated like they have a point. They don't want the line of inquiry that we bring up. So Candace Owens, she's up to second shooter number 17 right now. Now she thinks he was killed by a space laser or Jewish space laser. But she can never confront the idea of squib because it would unravel her entire worldview that she's promoting. And these people do not believe this stuff. There's no way they do. It's not consistent with their level of, I think, intellect. These people are pretty smart, but I think it's also inconsistent with how informed they are just based on the circles they run in. They can't literally believe these things. But these are talking points. What we're experiencing with these podcasters that are being promoted right now and being discussed, reviled because of their opinions about the Kirk thing, what we're seeing right now is simply propagandists giving you scripts. They're not researching. Like, okay, so for example, case in point, Ian Carroll is going to Utah to look around at the site where the shooting happened. So he's out there like he's investigating, like Sherlock Holmes with his magnifying glass, and he's going to be looking at the various vantage points where the various shooters were alleged to have been. He's not really on a fact-finding mission to inform you. He's trying to conform you. Again, it's not informing you, it's conforming you. He's conforming you to the idea that if he can rule out Tyler Robinson, it therefore proves that Benjamin Netanyahu pulled the trigger. That's the whole point. They're leading you to that conclusion. And I called it day one. I mean, I said this is the the template. And so the red pill ideology was always being targeted by woke right interests, by far right politics. And this became very clear after Trump and after the Vegas event. After the Vegas event and Q, suddenly conspiracy theories got heavily politicized. And I saw it merging, red pill is now associated with groypers and nationalism. And I'm like, wait, these conspiracy theories were always looking at global control and who owns the human race and where do we come from. And now we're being rounded up to get behind this guy as a savior who's going to fight the deep state. And a lot of people fell for it. I didn't. I recognize that there is no deep state. There is only the state. There are no governments. There's only government. There's only one. If you think there's a lot of them, it's because you're looking at trees in a forest and missing the big picture, that it's all one entity. Going through your comments. Does Candace know Kirk's not dead? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, okay, so Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk get started around the same time. They both would have been fully apprised of their roles moving forward. Candace, you have to remember, she was White Lives Matter. White Lives Matter started the day before Charlie Kirk because of the Irna Zaruski girl and the idea of a right-wing George Floyd. Now Charlie Kirk took that position, so he's White Lives Matter. Well, where did White Lives Matter start? Candace Owens and Ye. They created a scandal where she and Ye go wear these White Lives Matter shirts at a fashion show. And her husband, George Farmer, I believe his name is, very wealthy. She doesn't need the money. She could be the trad wife and stay home with her kids like she recommends for everybody else. But no, she's on there conspiracy theorizing all day, assuming their kids are real and any of this is real. But she was there at the very beginning of White Lives Matter, and her husband owned Parler, which was the right-wing alternative to Twitter before Musk bought it. And it was tanked, like leading up to January 6th. Jamarin May said, have you watched Snake Eyes? Yeah, Snake Eyes has quite a lot. It's got the Charlie Kirkland, it's got the neck wound, Kennedy assassination, it's got the Tempest, Jezebel. It has 9/10. It has the guy on top of the audience screaming like the guy who yelled USA after Kirk was shot. There's actually quite a lot in Snake Eyes. And then if you watch the VHS, the trailer, get this, the trailer on the VHS, and I talk about when I go see movies, I always watch the trailers. I have to go to the theater to see it because the trailers are always relevant. And this has been a consistent pattern. I've noticed this since I've been going to movies to watch for the programming. Well, if you get the VHS of Snake Eyes, the trailer is for Dead Man on Campus. Dead Man on Campus. So obviously, this is not the universe making jokes. These are not synchronicities. There are jokes. They're in jokes, if anything. Or Erica Kirk on that country music video where she swings on the zip line and she's by the 910 above Fremont, and then in the comments she's like, "Thank you, Tyler. We had a wonderful time doing the shoot." So you have this, Tyler, thank you, Tyler. We did the shoot 910, and all of it paints this picture. Yeah, we had a blast shooting. I mean, to me, that's hilarious. Damn Jack says, Kanye's become a great comedian of the years from his George Bush hates black people to his recent comments, comedy gold. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't kept up with Ye very much. But I do find it very interesting, his work very interesting. Like the Dawn Day and Dawn Day 2, a lot to unpack between those two events. Dawn Day 2 was the one on 2/22/2022 with that burning house thing. I mean, it seems very artsy, but I think there's a deep symbolic import to these things. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that during the pandemic, they shut down Burning Man. So Burning Man ran consecutively 33 times from 86 to 2019. They canceled 2020. But on the Burning Man weekend, Ye did Donde with the burning house, and he came out of it burning. I don't think that was insignificant, because I think the Burning Man ritual that happens every year in Black Rock City is more than just a gathering of like a Bohemian Grove for Democrats. I think these are pagan at the very core of it. The Burning Man symbolism is very intriguing, especially if you look into the weird coincidences, like the Burning Man who set himself on fire 2019 at the Ellipse. He was 33. Did so 33 years after the previous guy set himself on fire in the same spot. The one in 2019 had a USA shirt. Then we had the Burning Man Maxwell Azrello outside of the courthouse where Trump was on 4/19. The Waco anniversary where Dave Koresh, 33, was incinerated. And that's a whole other trail. Like we have mind maps on these things. So when you look at the big picture, in addition to the psyops and the influence operations that are like involving body counts and terror attacks and that kind of drama, there are many other events that are also part of this accretion, which becomes our history. You have to get out of the now and the 24-hour news cycle and the current thing to see what I'm talking about here. Just think of the last 40 years or 50 years, how many influence operations, psyops, and hoaxes got grafted onto history. The history book's going to reflect the mainstream view, like ChatGPT. It has a perspective, it has a point of view. History's not neutral, it's not objective. News is not objective, nor is it neutral. You know, the director of Snake Eyes, who happened to be born on 9/11, Brian De Palma, one of the things that's said about his movie is how he uses the camera's point of view to make a point. So if you watch the beginning of the movie, there's a boxing match, and you see the boxing match from the point of view of the boxer. And so it's kind of the camera, and the guy's punching at the camera. And it's kind of making the point that you can be convinced of almost anything, like a magic trick, based on where your attention is diverted. And so the worldview we have is largely the result of where their cameras have focused. So it lies by omission as much as by deliberate confabulation. Yeah, Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl, what's that going to be? Also, Taylor Swift just released an album today, or yesterday. I don't know why it's a big deal, but we have to consider the fact that these world stage characters are put up there for a reason. And if you don't know about Taylor Swift and the 13 stuff, oh, that was her 12th album. You know, she was in a movie called Amsterdam, and she died 13 minutes into the movie. She was pushed in front of a car. And she's been overtly identified with so many dead female icons with tragic deaths, like Amelia Earhart, Marilyn Monroe. There's been a number of deliberate associations made with her and these various icons. I mean, she is an idol. She is an icon. She's a propaganda vector beyond just being a performance artist. And there's a purpose to it. I know at the Super Bowl, she was there with Orange Spice. And I don't know, there was something kind of satanic about it, I think. Weren't they making like devil hands? There was something going on. But one of the things about these Super Bowls is that the Super Bowl halftime shows are like an example where the world stage has all of its attention focused, and they put a lot of programming into it. And there's been a consistent pattern going back with regard to the symbolic meaning of these performances, and it is quite consistent year after year. Rihanna, Alicia Keys, each of them showing up in red with this red-white thing is a big thing. But these are essentially rituals, pagan rituals and ceremonies. I think the one with Rihanna was a Gnostic Catholic mass. I think Alicia Keys and Usher in white, with the phoenix on his chest. It's all Christ coded. And then Kendrick Lamar. I even said it's interesting that Kendrick Lamar is going to host the next one because he's another one who's done a lot of the Christ symbolism in his works, where he has the crown of thorns, he's dressed in white, he's surrounded by female dancers in red who smear him in blood. Like, all of this stuff is actually part of a certain interpretation of Christianity, basically. It's the Gnostic Catholic Mass. But I'm like, why are they doing the Gnostic Catholic Mass on the Super Bowl to an audience that would not know what they're seeing? And my thinking on it is that we are always receiving and downloading data from all areas. Just so many things that we take in are just coming in through our periphery. They're not being consciously recognized, but it doesn't mean we're not taking it in. You know, it's like computer programming, garbage in, garbage out. Well, they're putting a lot of garbage in, but it's because later they're going to get an output. Like, all that predictive programming is there to get you to respond appropriately to their fake events, to their manufactured history, to all the changes that they are going to implement. The human being is a hackable animal. But I don't know much about Bad Bunny. But I do know there's already a budding controversy about it. The Christian right is very easy to trigger. Very, very easy. Everything to them is a culture war. Everything to them is an attack on traditional values. And that's part of the design here. So they like to bait the right by putting like progressive values on full display. And the right will call it satanic. What's up, Critterfest Sanctuary? Thank you for joining. Marcel says ball worship. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I first was made aware of this when someone that I met, she used to speak at city council meetings about fluoride in the water. She was like the city council had this like open mic, and she would always go up there and just talk about the banksters and the fluoride in the water, and George Bush did 9/11. But anyway, she gave me this pamphlet, and she's like, you got to look at this. And it was just describing how Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake were actually performing a rite pertaining to Imbolc, which means in milk, this Celtic rite, like Candlemas, which is celebrated on the same day, that the Super Bowl Sunday tends to fall upon this very specific holiday in the witches' sabbats. You know, they have the solstices, the equinoxes, and the in-betweens. And the Super Bowl Sunday is when they would celebrate the sun god, having been born on Christmas, is now having been weaned. And so that's the milk reference. So here you have Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. And the symbolism, according to this article, would be the blonde hair is the solar symbolism. He's the sun god representative. And she represents Frida, the goddess, a fertility thing, the green grass past the winter. But that her wardrobe malfunction was not a malfunction, but exposing the breast was actually a reference to the weaning of the sun god, consistent with this pagan holiday. And her piercing was actually it was the sun. The piercing looked just like a sun. So I saw that and I thought, well, wait a minute here. You have all the trappings of this annual pagan ceremony, but it's being performed at a widely viewed public spectacle. So then I start looking at these things consistently, and as a lot of people tend to do now, a lot of people watch the Super Bowl just to see what kind of occult mumbo jumbo they're going to plant in our minds. Oh, that's interesting. Bad Bunny, according to Lean Dion, Bad Bunny is partly the immigrant angle because he's Puerto Rican and his lyrics are not in English. Okay, I heard some people complaining that he doesn't sing in English. And others complained because of his fashion. And I don't know how much of that is just marketing. Freemason World Order says, do you think pastors who would say Pokemon and Harry Potter were satanic were correct? Interesting question. I have relatives who burned Harry Potter books, Pentecostals. The kids were forbidden from watching Simpsons because he didn't respect his mother and father. And maybe they weren't wrong. But when you say satanic, I think we have to get a little more specific. Because when you say satanic, it suggests that there's this dichotomy where the Christians are right and satanics are bad. And I don't think there's a difference. As in, like, if you think about who runs the world and all this stuff, I wouldn't say it's, quote, satanic. I would say it's a more authentic form or a more esoteric form of what the Christians practice. It's not specifically sun worship or pantheism. I think it's more, I don't know, pagan's a good word for it. Worshipping the forces of nature. And then having these myths where these things are personified, but not taking them literally. And I think that the mainstream religions are the exoteric, literal form that these that are basically meant for the masses. Like, when it comes down to it, I don't believe that the mainstream religions are any different than mainstream media. I think it's just a facet of government. I think it's all part of the same mind control infrastructure. And so when I talk about media being the way we get our worldview, well, you could get it from a holy book. You could have your entire worldview filtered through a particular holy book. And of course, the holy book you have is the only one that's right. Everyone else's books are wrong. And everybody agrees on this point. And I say they're all right. They're all correct. Every religion thinks it's right and everyone else is wrong. And it's like, okay, well, you can't all be right. But these are just worldviews. And one of the analogies I use is you look at Old Testament and New Testament. So Old Testament, what came before, explains the backstory, creation, etc. New Testament is where that picks up off, and it kind of just still is relevant today. They call it like the living Bible, because the New Testament is considered to be a guide today, that the book is like somehow communicating the real-time word of God, which is an interesting idea. So you have it all covered. You got the past, you got the present, and then it even has suggestions about the future, depending on how you look at it. And so all the doomsday stuff just presumes that the book contains predictions for the future. So now you have the entire timeline covered, past, present, and future. But I think media has replaced it. So we have our official history, our cosmology, Big Bang, up to the now, evolution, etc. And then we have our history books that tells us how we got here. But the news, I think, is like, I call it the news testament. If you look at media itself as having supplanted religion, well, its Bible is the TV, is your smartphone. It's the curated worldview. But the news today is there for conforming you to that worldview. It's not for informing you. So I think news is essentially like the gospels of this new religion. And that's where you get all its myths, its martyrs, its miracles. You know, I would argue that man on the moon was actually a miracle, tantamount to Christ walking on water. It's like, oh, look, our priesthood has been vindicated. We have done these miracles, and this is something the whole world can agree upon. So now it validates our particular model, our religion, for all intents and purposes. I think JFK assassination is like a modern crucifixion. It's a modern blood sacrifice. I was looking at very closely at the work of Marilyn Manson, because his album has what seemed to be predictive programming for the Charlie Kirk thing. One assassination under God. And if you look at his past, he has some other elements that are kind of consistent with this. But I was thinking about how the way that Turning Point USA is being described, Charlie Kirk's death was a sacrifice, and it's the turning point for the salvation of the West. So the suggestion is that because of his sacrifice, a new nation has been born, a new Christian nationalism. So the sacrifice is now the starting point for this new thing. And I kind of think that's what one assassination under God was actually foreshadowing. That one nation under God being combined with assassination. Because, yeah, they are making this into a sacrifice. And the song repeats the word sacrifice, and you will always be entertained. So I get the idea that events like that are essentially like crucifixions, that the JFK thing, and this is suggested in one of his other videos, that the JFK death is essentially a modern sacrifice in order to change society, to steer people, to convert people. So look at all the people converting to Kirkianity. It's like a new Christianity. It's this Christianity that's been infused with politics. They've merged these things effectively. So then I'm looking at the 100,000 people crying for Charlie Kirk. I'm sorry, 99,999 because Erica wasn't crying. But you look at that big mass of people there and this martyr being created. So are you telling me that those are real Christians? They think they are. But they have no idea that their entire religious impulse, their religious convictions have been hijacked by government propaganda and magic tricks. Again, Charlie Kirk's death was a magic trick, not a snuff film. So when I brought up earlier to that, I said that I don't separate religion from government, it's because I can't. I think that religion and media, entertainment, are tools of government. Entertainment is a branch of government. Andrea says, somewhere in the ancient mystic trinity, you get 3 as a magic number. The past, present, and the future, the faith, the hope, and the charity, the heart, the brain, and the body give you 3. Yeah, the numerology stuff is incredible, and the names. When you get into it, what you see, I believe what we're seeing are code words, symbols that are esoteric. Manly P. Hall, Masonic historian, said this, something along the lines of that when the veil of symbolism has been lifted, that man will see, basically that there's a level of, there's a veil that's been placed over our interpretation of things. But if you can understand symbolism, you can see through it. Like a lot of truthers will say they have to tell us, they're mocking us, they're putting it in plain sight. And they're right. They're right. They're essential. The symbols, the occult trappings, the inside jokes, the aptronyms, the names that somehow reflect the person's purpose, the Shakespearean stuff, the foreshadowing, all this stuff is out there, but you can't see it because you haven't been given the initiate's interpretation. You're profane. That's why I at times hearken back to the idea of the hoodwink. When you're brought into the Masonic order, you have a wool hat, a wool hood over your head, the wool over your eyes. So when I say that everybody's programmed, there's no opt-out, it's true. The whole point of education is to put the wool over your eyes. They build they build it into your worldview. You're hoodwinked. When you get brought into the secret society networks, the Freemasonic ceremonies do this as well. They pull the hood off your head when you're in the chamber. So you don't see how you get there, but when you're in there, they pull the hood off, and it's lit by the 3 candles, the 3 great lights. They have these, it's all about 3s. It's kind of interesting, but so the room's lit up, and now you can see all these people in their various jewels and aprons and stuff, all pointing swords at you in a circle, but basically, okay, you're one of us now. One of us meaning you're not like those people outside who cannot see because they have been blinded. You have not had the wool, who have not had the wool taken off their eyes. And the oaths describe them as wandering in a wilderness of darkness. Darkness is ignorance. So the power structure is based on foistering ignorance upon the masses. Ignorance as a weapon of mind war. So the program exists. It's always existed. It exists with this distinction between the exo and the esoteric. Jamarian May says, is not Saturn the keeper of time, that one that controls the world? Everything in the 3D is bound by time. You know, a good example of this and how it's demonstrated on the in the realm of entertainment, the Saturn stuff, it's pretty big. Look at Francis Ford Coppola's movie I referenced earlier, Megalopolis, where at the very beginning of the movie, they freeze time. These individuals called the Design Authority. They're dressed all in black. They have black rimmed hats, which are associated with Saturn. The color black, the rim, the Saturnian rings. And they freeze time, and then they detonate downtown New York. And it looks very 9/11-y. Now, this is at the beginning of the movie. And the movie opens up where the main character is standing on a tower on top of a big clock. And this all goes back. Because and Francis Ford Coppola is brilliant for doing this. What he has done in his movie is he merged Neo from the Matrix and he merged the Dark City story into it. So the main character, played by Adam Driver, looks like Neo. One of the first things I noticed. That's intentional because of the 9/11 associations. You even have Lawrence Fishburne as his driver, playing a very Matrix-like role, like Morpheus. Morpheus is like, here's how the Matrix works, talking about the space that they're in. In Megalopolis, he's talking to him about how time works, because it's about time control, which is under the auspices of Saturn. Saturn's time control, restraint. So the Design Authority have the power to freeze time, and they detonate something downtown, insinuating 9/11. Well, when he's on the clock, that's right out of Dark City. And Dark City has these characters called the Strangers. And the Strangers, like the Design Authority in Megalopolis, dress in black rimmed hats, and they control time. So if you think about it, the ones who are behind the scenes engineering these events, they're controlling time. If they're controlling history by writing it in advance, implementing it on the world stage, they control time. They control the context of our lives. So you could look at the Design Authority, the Strangers, as the Saturnian aspect of the rulers of this place. That very much that this is why you see the cube. This is why you see the 666 and all this. It's all intrinsic to their symbolic language. And when you understand the language a bit, you can see it in the movies, how it's telegraphed, how they tell you who's in control. But the Saturn concept embodies the idea of constraint. Saturn, of course, is death. Kronos devouring his child. And where did I just see that? Oh, that's right. Okay, so I just saw Fantastic Four. So I'm watching Fantastic Four, and I'm looking at these characters as representing the four elements, which is all part of this occult system. So in the Fantastic Four, you have these four characters who go up in a rocket, which is an obelisk, a symbol of the sun. They go up into space and they get powers from the sun and they come back down. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So in this Fantastic Four movie that just came out, the main antagonist is Galactus, and he's after the child that one of the characters had the baby. He's after the baby, like Saturn to devouring, to eat the child. So if you look at the subtext of it, it has this built-in idea of Saturn versus the sun, which is a reoccurring theme in a lot of these movies. Like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Sun and Saturn, ruler of the night and the day. Or Terminator. JC, John Connor, the savior. And then who's after him? The Terminator. And the Terminator, of course, is what you call the point where day dies, where the night overcomes day, the dividing line. That's the Terminator. And the idea is that at sunset, Saturn kills the sun. The Lord of Darkness, Set, Prince of Darkness, dismembers the sun. So the sun setting is actually the death of the sun every day played out in this cycle. And that's why after Darth Vader chops Luke's hand off, his sword hand, which mirrors the myth of Osiris having his phallus chopped off, the sword hand, the lightsaber, light, life, it's all symbolic. He hangs from a cross in Cloud City. And then he's later. But anyway, in Fantastic Four, I was looking at this Galactus character and the child and these four characters as essentially representing the idea of the four elements, and then the child being the quintessence, pure spirit. Like there's a lot of occult subtext here. But I made this connection with Galactus and Saturn because of the way he wanted the child, and he's devouring stars, he's devouring planets, and Saturn is like this devourer, like time devours all things. Well, interestingly, I looked back, and at Rise of the Silver Surfer, the first of these Fantastic Four movies, there's a scene where they show Galactus moving through the solar system, and the shadow of his head covers the planet Saturn. Or, Darth Vader has the Death Star. Have you seen the comparison of the Death Star to Saturn's moon Mimas? It looks the exact same. So these are intentional overlaps in entertainment that are based upon Kabbalistic occult symbolism. And it's a routine thing. Like I said, Dark City, Strangers, the Design Authority, and it's fascinating how they do this with the actors. Like Ed Harris, he plays Christoph in The Truman Show, who says that people will accept the world as it's given to them. They'll accept whatever they're told, essentially. What was he saying about The Truman Show? The exact quote was something to the effect of that Truman was just going to passively accept whatever he was told. But he's the creator of this set, and you could consider him to be like Saturn. He controls time, he controls space, he controls the material world, prison to those who can't see through it. So the Truman Show was about him being in a prison that he didn't know was a prison. And Christoph was like, in a way, in this position of Saturn. So that's played by Ed Harris. So then you see Ed Harris shows up again in Snowpiercer, which is another movie where he is the engineer in this train that everybody lives on. So he's the controller, and the train's going through the cycle. So it's all about cycles, which pertains to Saturn, who's the god of the harvest, the Grim Reaper symbolism. It's the scythe. It's about the harvest, the part of the year where the sun dies. The cycle of the death and rebirth every year. But it's all about the cycle. So there's Ed Harris in that role again. Well, then you see him again in Westworld, where he's the, quote, man in black with a knife, like a scythe. And the synths, the people who are in the simulation, every day they die. And they start the same day over again, and they don't remember. So they're trapped in a cycle. And he's the man in black. Again, so I'm just pointing out how you'll see the same symbolism, but you'll often see actors who embody the same archetypes being used again and again to portray that occult role. Like, it's not their exoteric role, but it's the subtext. Andrea points out that season 51 of SNL starts tomorrow with Bad Bunny as a host. Interesting. Okay. We'll have to look more into that character. Somebody mentioned Labubu. It's kind of interesting that Labubus are popular right now. I'm seeing them now. It's like these bunnies with these creepy, jagged teeth faces, like human faces. Numbers, 5150. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, what is that 51 thing? I need to catch up on South Park. It's not a coincidence that South Park had Charlie Kirk on before Kirk died. That was the way of ensuring that the target demographics that would be reacting to the Charlie Kirk thing knew who he was. so they could react appropriately. And it makes my point for me that if anything is promoted, it's meant for you to see it. It's like they're putting it in the spotlight. If it's in the spotlight, it's because it's part of the next scene. If you look at the world stage as our consensus version of things, but the world stage is defined by what the consensus is told to focus on. That's why I don't believe in this head in the sand approach. Like, you can turn off your TV, you don't have to pay attention to any of this. You'll probably be happy without it because it doesn't affect you. However, to be informed, you kind of have to look at what's in the spotlight, but if you look at it objectively, dispassionately, and skeptically, you don't get involved in the drama. Like someone said, maybe you didn't take a break from all this bad news. And I'm like, I'm enjoying the show. Like, this isn't stressful or taxing for me. This is the greatest show on earth. And what we are doing here is we're paying attention to the set pieces, the actors, the props that are put into the spotlight for the scenes as they happen. But they put them up there. So Kirk was propped up just in time. And I don't know if I mentioned this, Kirk's final YouTube upload was a video entitled "Enough is Enough." And if you've looked into the Illuminati playing cards, you all know "Enough is Enough" is the sniper card. And that code, "Enough is Enough," was all over the Trump shooting. So the fact that he posted that as his last post on YouTube is just more indication that we're looking at a hoax. Okay, I'll have to check out the South Park. I need to catch up. I really detest South Park. I had a hard time watching Snake Eyes. That's why I like going to movie theaters, because I get to see the trailers, and then I'm not inclined to shut it off halfway. But I'll do it. I'll do my homework. Bad Bunny just wore a shirt that said 2032 at a WrestleMania match. Yeah, that's right, Violet Pangon. Hulk Hogan said enough is enough when they try to shoot the president. The Hulk Hogan thing's intriguing. The Hulk thing. I haven't figured it all out yet. But listen to this thing. This is just a quick one. 2 examples of movies that came out concurrent with the shooting: Mickey 17 and Captain America, Brave New World. Both of these were noted, and they were specifically noted and talked about because they seemed to foreshadow and mirror the Trump thing. One was Harrison Ford getting shot at the podium, and the other one was the Trump character played by Mark Ruffalo, who got shot at by a Luigi-like character, and the bullet grazed his cheek, left a blood streak, and he posed for the cameras after surviving the attempt. What's intriguing is both of these characters have birth dates attached to days presidents were shot. Mark Ruffalo, born 11/22. Harrison Ford, born 7/13. But it gets even weirder because Mark Ruffalo played the Hulk. And in Captain America, Harrison Ford becomes the Red Hulk. So 2 Hulks with dead president birthdays, and then you got Hulk Hogan associated with the Trump shooting. So I haven't quite figured it out, this Hulk thing. I figured the Red Hulk is probably representing MAGA, like MAGA extremism. And maybe that's what we're seeing right now. You know, Trump deploying troops to Portland. Mango Penguin says, my daughter wants me to go see Black Phone too. Oh, you want to go take her? I seen the trailers for Black Phone, and it's like they have phone booths. And I'm like, would your daughter even know what a phone booth is? Like, the phone is like an antiquated piece of technology. So it's interesting that they're making movies about it still. Dark Ghost Wind. Ooh, good one. During the funeral was the continuous mention of put on the armor of God. Another Butler reference when Bannon recalls Ephesians 6:11. Yeah, they kept on talking about Ephesians 6:11, the armor of God, because Trump was shot at 6:11. And they said this was God telling us that God deflected the bullet. My question would be, why didn't God deflect the bullet from hitting Charlie? I guess God favors a guy who's been married 5 times with a very public record of living a very un-Christ-like existence. But this makes sense. So this makes sense that Charlie Kirk would be the martyr, the assassinated martyr, not Trump. And one other point, there's no way they were going to kill Trump. None of the predictive programming supports that. It consistently shows him, or the representative of him, surviving in every one of these. That's why I brought up the Manson guy. Must be in a hurry. Oh, it's a Friday. You know, I can tell what day it is by the way people drive. Like, I just saw like a car full of teenagers without their headlights on speeding out of a McDonald's parking lot. Like, I can tell. You can tell when people, like, I don't like driving on certain parts of town. You know, this place is so predictable. Like, I'm not a denialist. I posted a video from when Mick Media interviewed me. And they had Dr. Gail Saltz psychoanalyze me. And she said, he's anti-authoritarian. It's like, yeah, is that a bad thing? But they implied that I just don't want to accept how bad things are, so I call it all fake. And I'm like, no, that's not me at all. I'm just distinguishing between real and fake. Like, there's plenty of real stuff. I know I could go right now down to the war zone. I know what street corner to stand on if you want to see a shooting, stabbing, or hit and run. Like, one of those 3 will occur. If I want to be shot by a group of minors in a stolen car, I'll go hang out by the CVS on Manal. Oh, yeah, that's right, Lean Dion. Charlie was a miracle. So here's another element to it. They're saying Charlie stopped the bullet with his spine because it was a miracle. Because the bullet would have kept going. It would have killed everybody there. There wouldn't have been any survivors. The bullet had no intention of stopping. It was going to keep on going and going. But it was a miracle. His neck stopped the bullet. So they called him the Man of Steel. Now, that was one of these articles that was put out there to antagonize the conspiracy theorists, to help them make the case that it was a second shooter. Because for it to have been Taylor Robinson, that miracle couldn't have happened. The only way that his neck would have stopped a bullet is if it was a smaller caliber, likely closer, but from a different position. So the Man of Steel thing comes in, so it's a Superman reference. Well, afterward, the shooter runs to Dairy Queen, which has now been closed down, and he poses next to a poster of Superman. And in that photo, look at his face, he looks like Lex Luthor from the new Superman. So that, to me, is like, okay, Superman, being connected to it. Then you look at the governor of Utah. Tell me the governor of Utah isn't a spitting image of Lex Luthor. No way these are coincidences. And it's tied into, just like with the Fantastic Four, it's tied into the deeper symbolism of these comic book characters. Superman is Christ coded, as was CK. JFK coded, there's Christ stuff. The Superman thing is part of attaching the idea of a savior from above, a heaven-sent savior, a sacrificial savior. But yeah, Governor Cox looks exactly like Lex Luthor. Nicotrama says, if a big event actually happened, would we ever know about it? Yeah, what's the biggest real event you can think of that that would be something that they would ordinarily have to do with a fake event, like a PSYOP? Like, PSYOPs stand out for being highly unlikely, extraordinary. Like, we don't often see planes hitting buildings. You know, that's a rare occurrence in itself. And then you have the idea of the building falling in its own footprint, which 9/11 truth was manufactured. So right now we have Charlie Kirk truth. And all the Charlie Kirk truthers are convinced that somebody else pulled the trigger. 9/11 truthers were the same exact thing. They all agree a terrible attack happened and people died, but somebody else did it. That's the basis for conspiracy theory, is we agree the bad thing happened, but somebody else did it. And they run around, we're just asking questions, but all along, every one of their questions is loaded with, it was Israel. And conspiracy theories are actually boring when you recognize that they all fit the same predictable pattern. Poultry Guy says, freedom is the largest psyop. Yeah. Yeah, in a really real sense. And I would also say that the only real conspiracy is the meta-conspiracy. The meta-conspiracy is all the conspiracies are the conspiracy to keep alternative thinkers from figuring out that history is manufactured and the large transformative events are faked, staged. Freemason World Order says there was an old webcomic called Grim Tales where 9/11 is stated to be a ritual to please death. Yeah, so there's two explanations for these events that people gravitate towards when it comes to why do they kill these people, or with all these like staged events, or what's the purpose of it. Like 9/11, was it actually an occult ritual with these blood sacrifices? And that was popular. David Icke pushed that as well. He said they're really killing people in these school shootings, but it's because these are human sacrifices and it's feeding the reptilians. When Sandy Hook happened, I was listening to Alex Jones, I remember, and he had me convinced that the government is using mind-controlled assassins and they're doing blood sacrifices and influencing public opinion with these events. And it's very ominous and very dark. And that's where a lot of truthers are stuck, the bloody guardrail. And when you look at it from that perspective, how can you arrive at any conclusion other than you're dealing with some significantly evil people? And that's why people get emotional and they get mad and they want revenge, and these are the bad guys. But they're not really bad guys. They're just a bunch of theater people. You might question the ethics of manufacturing fake events to influence public opinion, lying and propaganda, sure. But it's not as bad as what truthers think. That's why I say that the only difference between a blue pill and a red pill, the blue pill is a dream pill. You're dreaming, you're sleeping, you're having dreams. The red pill is a nightmare pill. You still haven't woken up. Now you're actually deeper into the dream and you think it's real. And it's worse than what everybody else says. Ooh, nice, thank you, Thirst for Truth. Appreciate the support. Could not operate without it. But now it's guaranteed. The handbook for the recently deprogrammed is out. And that needed to happen. I'm actually less stressed out than I've ever been. I just like, we put so much work into this, and it's been on very shaky ground for a few reasons. And I thought, well, I have to at least get a consolidation of all of our best ideas, put it into a philosophic framework so that we can establish this as the epicenter for a third branch of media that can grow exponentially depending on how good we are at networking with those who've already figured it out. But that if we don't do this, it's not going to exist. That, we're actually quite proactive. We are the cutting fringe, the cutting edge here. But outside of the IPS think tank, is there any organized body attempting to platform this perspective? The perspective inclusive of media fakery and long-term history bending. Like, no, there isn't. I would like to think so, but no. And we're kind of purists about it. One of the points that I made, and this is in the book, is anti-anti. If you are taking an anti-position on anything, you're controlled opposition at this point. You need to get rid of the antis. If you have a really strong feeling about something, like, I gotta be anti, just be non. Like the anti-vaxxer movement is controlled opposition, and it's part of a cluster of beliefs. So if you take that belief, now you're going to be lumped in with a lot of other people who are totally reality compromised. We aren't. Anybody in Trutherville is reality compromised. We aren't. So why would you side with them? You have to resist the reflexive anti-positions that they hand you, because it's always controlled. So the point of it is, you got to be anti-pro and anti-anti. It's the only way out. And that's how they hook you, because the people who take these positions think they're fighting for a righteous cause. It's all good intentions all around. Jermaine May says, might need a new edition of the coloring book, Tim. Oh, nice. Colors neck red with fireworks and this. Yeah, okay. We should probably do another one. I will produce another coloring book. That first one, I think it's called Auto Hoaxology. The first one is pretty good. It's got a lot of Kubrick. iFeep says, drug pushers for pill poppers, red or blue, either way, they still got you. Exactly. It's a false dichotomy, and it's a trap. It's actually reverse psychology. Trutherism, conspiracy theories are all established with reverse psychology, where it's like they just know that a lot of people aren't going to buy the mainstream, and they just factor in for it. Truther bait has been another recent development that we've accounted for as well, because they want to discredit anyone who's not mainstream, so they love to plant all kinds of misleading clues and get you to sign off on it, and then they can discredit you. It's very clever. And back to my original point, because we're at this place now where they're dealing with us, or they're attempting to. And I'm not saying this to be grandiose or anything, or overestimate the importance of this, but the fact of it is, the entire reason for all these conspiracies is inherently damage control. It's containment. And they're trying to deal with those who are breaking out of the containment, those of us who have jumped the bloody guardrail. So we've jumped the bloody guardrail, and beyond that, we've determined over time, and this is all empirical research, that the fake news over time does have an observable, measured effect on history as the consensus accepts it, which gives total power to those who control it. Those who control, who controls the past, controls the present, controls the future. This is all Orwellian. We live in 1984. I used to say that as the date. Like, today is October 3rd, 1984, because it's always been 1984. And it always will be 1984 on the world stage. Like, it's actually that bad. It's kind of interesting, too. I was just thinking about 1984. It's like 1984 is this dystopian thing. Like, we don't want this to happen. It's like, we're already there. And they didn't even have to force it on us. They sold it to us. They sold us on a lifestyle of self-surveillance. Violet Pengon says, did you say about Kirk set? The people around are actors. I take it the whole thing is a set. Yeah, a lot of people are looking at this thing correctly. I do find a lot of people who are looking at the way that they responded, and they're given the wrong interpretation. So the conspiracy theory view is all the people surrounding Charlie Kirk moved in a way that appeared rehearsed. So it looks like an operation. Like, oh yeah, this is a professional job. And I agree with them. It was professional. They were rehearsed. And it looks rehearsed. It looks like they, in fact, there's this one video you can see where one of the cameramen moves into position to record them running around the backside. But they're wrong when they start with the premise that he's dead. So it looks like a well-rehearsed execution. But no, it was a well-rehearsed psyop. It was a drill. Oh, that's an interesting one. Lean Dion says, the fake Christian nationalist rise on the right gives Handmaiden Tale vibes. Dark Ghostwind says, crazy that with the heavy promotion of realistic practical effects in the 2000s and AI-generated footage in the 2020s, nobody's thought that. Go on. Well, they're masters of misdirection because we're told AI is going to be problematic. We're reality compromised. Nobody's going to tell real from fake. We're going to be deep faked. No, we've already been deep faked. They deep faked us with history, with lies, manufactured history, with synthetic masks, with actors on the world stage with fraudulent backstories. I mean, we've been deep faked. We were born into a deep faked world. It's not coming. It's already here. But now they're just updating a lot of their tech. Jamarian May says, does it not seem that there are some new entity running the world? Things have always been... Today's world seems like it's run by mental asylum patients. You know, I'm not really sure. Like, I'm confident in my assessment of fake news going back. But as far as when did fake overcome real? Like how far back? It's an open question. But I'm starting with ground zero. You know, I'm starting from today, looking back. As far as we can ascertain, media was never not being used for this purpose. Media was always supplanting religion. It was always in the control of the secret societies, the security clearance societies. Like, we do have a two-tiered system here. You have the profane and the initiated. I don't think there's ever been a point where it wasn't continuous. The old world order became the new world order. Like in The Matrix, they say, born into bondage. There is a lot of truth in that movie. And so I like the Matrix analogy. And there's some more interesting stuff about it as well. Lately I've been thinking about with Neo and the whole 9/11 connection and the passport connection and his birthday being 9/11. So Neo, world savior, 9/11 birthday. Some say that's Jesus' birthday, some theologians, but it reaffirms this theme of 9/11 being a modern or a contemporary myth, like a crucifixion in a way. As far as this religion goes, this religion needs its myths. It needs its miracles. And we watch, this is so surreal, we watch them manufacture a martyr in front of our eyes. The lie world order. But anyway, I had to get out here because I was looking at Tim Pool and Jack Posobiec and these others looking absolutely foolish in these sombreros. And they're talking about predictive programming and utopia. They're talking about Savant and how it influenced people to respond in a certain way to the Charlie Kirk thing. So the only reason they would be doing that is I think they're trying to create a strategy for taking this conversation out of our hands or preventing this conversation from spreading. So they got to somehow stamp it out. But they can't. We're in a very good position here, I think, because what we're describing is above the pay grade of your alt media propagandists, and they can't acknowledge what we're saying. You know, they can handle NASA skeptics. They completely controlled that and turned it into a clown show. They turned it into a mess. The whole flat earth versus round earth debate and stuff missed the point entirely, because it should have been about worldview and how we get it. Although it's very revealing. You know, for anyone who wants to understand better the metascript concept, The idea of engineered history, one of the best examples of it is looking at the space program. I mean, unless you think it's real, whatever you think about the shape of the world or outer space or all that, the space program is pageantry. It's largely just theater. Many of these rituals and launches, yeah, there's a reason why. They have all the trappings of the mystery schools. I've called NASA an Egyptian mystery school for a reason. I think space travel, in some ways, you could look at it as allegory for ascending higher states of consciousness. There's a lot of fascinating ideas here attached to the real purpose, the occult purpose of NASA when it comes to our engineered worldview. We used to look back at the Babylon working quite a bit, because there you had this nexus point where it was like science fiction mixing with mystery Babylon, mixing with rocket science. Jack Parsons, JPL, American head of the OTO, Crowley counterpart here in America, with the movie star, and then you had Marjorie Cameron, and then you had L. Ron Hubbard, science fiction writer, later creates Scientology, which is a space religion. NASA is a space religion. I call it NASAtology. But the elements there, you had the mystery school representation, you had the rocket science, you had the movie magic, and then you had science fiction. And if you put that all in a cauldron, in some occult ritual, what comes out of it? Our modern paradigm, the space age. The space age, what we think of the space age, man becoming multiplanetary, that's essentially like religion's promising man going into paradise, into heaven. It's a modern religion. NASAtology. I'm not a NASAtologist. I have a lot of friends who are NASAtologists. And when you compare the two, NASAtology and Scientology, one of them has better actors and the other has better special effects. Imagine if they combine the two. That's why I've been looking forward to Tom Cruise going to space. Because Tom Cruise was on a set with Stanley Kubrick, which has the Apollo 11 fakery there in the background. Kubrick's daughter is a Scientologist. Freemason World Order says L. Ron Elon Musk. Yeah, Elon Musk comes right out of a Werner von Braun book, Mars, A Technical Tale. You know, we need to do a Zoom conference and just do a deep dive into the various parts that make up Elon Musk, because he's a composite character. He's a Frankenstein. Nick Bostrom, Werner von Braun, Willy Wonka, Tony Stark, Iron Man. I think there's a bit of Jack Parsons. There's a lot of Henry Ford. We're talking about Elon Musk and the various aspects of his character, his world stage personage. But yeah, one of the earliest examples of him pre-existing, like Charlie Kirk, for example. He was a toddler when Snake Eyes came out. So how's that about him? Well, it's because he took on this role. Elon Musk. Well, you've got Werner von Braun's book, Mars, A Technical Tale, about the first human to colonize Mars. Is called the Elon. The Elons are head of the rulers of this colony. And they set up a structure, an organizational structure analogous to that in Rome, which is why we affectionately dubbed Elon Musk Pope Elon. Lean Dion says he cameos in an Iron Man movie with the new rocket tech for Stark. Yeah, and I don't believe him, but Robert Downey Jr. says that when he wanted to know how to be Iron Man and Tony Stark, he studied Elon Musk to be that character. So they love to merge real and fake. They do it all the time. They merge the two. I think one of the big examples of this, one of the big tells as far as the Charlie Kirk thing being fake and staged, is that 4 days before he gets shot, he goes to South Korea and he meets with the young Republican group there just like his corresponding movie character who gets shot in the throat in front of his young Republican group. I mean, it's the merging of real and fake. This is what Baudrillard called hyper reality. We're living in hyper reality. I talked about hyperstitions. Hyperstitions are the lies that everyone agrees upon because they've been televised and the system reinforces them as existing. Like the Atlantic article writes about George Floyd and Charlie Kirk as though those are both real events. So the real treating the fake as real unknowingly because it's a closed system and it's a feedback loop. Yeah, those are hyperstitions. But the term hyperreality refers to the point where they've so effectively merged real and fake that the people in it can't tell the difference. They are in a Truman Show. And it's incredible to watch. Like, I think the spectacle of the 100,000 people at the memorial was an incredible display of power. I mean, that was just, it was extra. And by the way, someone says that they rented that venue months ago. And I was thinking about that. Like, there's a lot of questions that have been raised that are valid questions. Like, I find it highly implausible that they would have done a autopsy funeral in time for 9/11 to drag the coffin around with J.D. Vance posing in front of it. They hijacked 9/11 for Charlie Kirk. Ifepe says, I suspected it was fake, but I knew it was when they claimed 33 hours after they found the suspect. Yeah, so for those who would say you guys call everything fake, look, I was undecided until I saw them saying 33 hours. Suddenly it wasn't so convincing. Well, when I saw the Hulu thing, I sat down to watch Hulu, and I knew we struck gold on that one, because that example of the rigged reality, of the entrainment between entertainment and fake events. So it's axiomatic. This is a rule. Predictive programming, concurrent programming only ever foreshadows fake events. None of the stuff foreshadowed is ever real. I don't know why people are confused about this. There are some people who are on the fence. Well, I don't know for sure if he's really dead or not. It might be real. Well, this would make it the exception to the rule. It would make it the exception. This would be an exceptional event to have been predicted years in advance to be real. So now we're going to say the media predicted the future and all the other ones were predicting fake events? Like, no, that's not consistent to think that way. We have a methodology here. We have an approach. We have a well-reasoned, well-thought-out set of presumptions moving into this. And it's pretty much axiomatic that the entertainment only ever mirrors and foreshadows things that are fake. It wouldn't be possible otherwise, without inserting some kind of higher power or lower power divine fallacy explanation, and we reject those. Yeah, that's an exact quote from Cash Patel. He said 36 hours, no, 33 hours to be exact. See you in Valhalla. Cash Patel. It's like, no, Christians don't go to Valhalla. When you die, if you're, I guess you worship Thor, and you die in battle, then a Valkyrie will come, and the Valkyries look like Erica Kirk, basically, and they will take you to Valhalla, where you will drink with all your buddies and wait for the Ragnarok apocalypse battle. So it's not even your final resting spot. It's not like paradise. It's kind of like where you go to await the final battle. So why would he have said Valhalla? And you know what's interesting? So in the show The Tempest, the widow, the stories about the widow, she's being guarded by this contractor who works for the Valkyrie group. And again, see you in Valhalla, Valkyries take you to Valhalla. There are so many overlaps between the two. You know, even in Snake Eyes, the storm is called Jezebel. The Tempest is a storm. Snake Eyes has the storm. Erica Kirk was called the Storm when she was on the stage. Jamarian says, any comment on the 3 Atlas operation? Well, the Atlas thing was a factor. It made its appearance before 2020. The C-19 is what they called it, the Atlas comet. So it might mean something. The book Atlas Shrugged is about the secret society who shut down, put everyone into darkness, and they hide out in a place called Atlantis. And Atlantis, the myth of Atlantis sunk. Makes me think about the West and this idea of the sinking. And the sinking is just metaphor for plunging into darkness. And I'm not saying they're going to unplug everything and put us in literal darkness. I don't think they'll do that. I think that one would run counter to their operation because we would probably benefit from it. I think the idea of the blackout is more about the collective hoodwinking of humanity, reaching its next stage, possibly permanent. That's why I say it's incontestable, because we're reaching a point where you're not going to be able to see through it. That's why I said we have to move away from the over-reliance on visual deconstruction and look at metascript, context, peripheral information, and we have to be somewhat rigorous about this because there's going to be a time where you're not going to be able to discern real from fake. They're going to replace their terrible crisis actors with perfect AI actors. They're perfecting their system. Hank G says, is Tyler sort of a guardian in the Masonic tradition? Yeah, it's not spelled the same way, but it sounds the same. The Tyler is the guy at the door with the sword to keep the profane out. So the hoodwink of the day is the black screen. It's the monolith. It's the new monotheism. It really is. This synchronizing all mankind around this single frame of reference. Tomanoid3 says, the actress in Snake Eyes was in Head of State 2025 as Elizabeth Kirk. That's interesting. That's big, actually. Well, I'll look at that one. Thank you, Tomanoid. The actress in Snake Eyes was the Head of State 2025. This is good. And the Dead Man on Campus as a trailer, that's pretty solid as well. So these coincidences that pile up have previously been misinterpreted as something unexplainable, something confusing, something mystical, synchromystic. And no, it's actually not. We're looking at man programming man. It's actually quite simple. Predictive programming as product placement for future fake events. Poultry Guy says, I haven't believed anything they've told me in over a decade. All the connections lost their allure as well. Right. Well, there was no explanation for the connections. And you look at these connections and it's like, okay, there's no way man could have done this. You know how many truthers have said that to me? And I would do these informal polls on X. I would just ask people, hey, what do you think causes this stuff? And they would say, it's got to be higher than man. No way man could do that. I had some people pretty aggressively trying to get me to accept the premise that only a simulation could explain this. And I've had to explain to them that, no, the events are simulated, but we're not in a simulation. The news is fake. Reality is not fake. But if you assume news is real and the real world, then these glitches you see will then logically lead you to conclude, fallaciously, that reality is fake. And so they've managed to break people's concept of reality, where they think that the fabric of reality has been torn asunder. I try to explain The Tempest to somebody who was talking about Snake Eyes, and he said Snake Eyes was bad enough. Now, the fabric of reality is torn. So he could not process the real-time coincidences. And their conclusion that it must be higher than man has been planted there by, I would argue, by the very same entities that are involved in faking these events. It's part of their damage control system. There's the strategy. Anybody seeing through this should be misled. Mislead them to think that it must be something higher or just a coincidence. Dark Ghost Wind says, Metcalf and the Ukrainian had a meme coin shilling event. I don't understand if the meme coins and AI generated memes related to these events are not organic, but they appear in a lot of psyops like this. Yeah, I think there's something about these psyops. You could call these ARGs, alternate reality games, where they do involve your participation, and a lot of people do get involved. So there are people who legitimately think Charlie Kirk died, and they're happy about it, and they're fighting MAGA over it. There are people who engage. So it's an alternate reality game means that it's kind of like it's theater with predetermined conclusions, but the audience is invited to participate, like a role-playing game, LARPing. But the higher than man thing sufficed for a lot of people because it gave them the sense that they had become mystical. Like, imagine that. You're like, you spend years of your life thinking that you've seen through the matrix, you've seen the glitches, and everybody else is asleep, and you've seen through it. And then somebody says, well, no, you're not actually seeing through the universe. You're actually seeing through government propaganda. That's kind of an ego blow. Now they have to say, okay, I've been wrong this whole time, and I thought I had achieved enlightenment. I thought I was Neo in the Matrix, but now I'm realizing I'm just somebody noticing government propaganda, which is still an awakening. It's still an elevation in your level of situational awareness. It's better to know than not to know. But the final guardrail beyond the bloody one, I think, is the ego, the inability to admit one was wrong. But the point of no turning back, the point where somebody will leave the world stage and not fall for anything ever again and see how it works, that final step is recognition of long-term engineered events and all the supporting content that leads up to it. And the full implications are pretty staggering, but it is the only real conspiracy. Like, see, these conspiracy theorists are conspiratained all day long with all their rabbit trails that lead them nowhere. And here we are saying, no, the only real conspiracy is that our history is completely fabricated and manufactured, and nothing on the world stage can be considered organic. That is a conspiracy, but it's a successful one. It's not even a theory, it's an observation. It's a conspiracy in progress. Plain Decoded says, you're just a marginalized, fringe, eccentric ideologue, and I may dismiss you with my stereotyping fallacy. Well, one of the big differences between off-world stage and on-world stage is active and passive. Are you actively or passively consuming the news? And if you believe it when you see it because of headlines, or you default believe it, you're passive. And this includes conspiracy theorists. They passively accepted that Kirk was killed by someone other than the mainstream's suspect. There's no active engagement there as far as critically examining it. No, they don't actually process it. Like I say, we're fake news wood chippers. We're processing the information. No, they're getting their information essentially beak to beak, like mother bird pre-masticating the food and spitting it into their beaks. No processing involved, completely passive. But the ego thing, What I mean is people are attached to their sense of self that they've projected, that they've stood by, and they see it as maybe even a loss in integrity to admit that they're wrong. And I'm saying there's no shame in admitting that we're wrong. We were all born into this. We were all given maids and hoodwinks and programming. Ollie Goering says, I am entertained. Violet Pangon says, I'm disappointed in the scriptwriters if this is the best show they have. Yeah, my thinking is this. The reason why the movies are better than the stuff they do on the fake news is there's a larger talent pool and great incentives to create great art. But when you're looking at the stuff on the news that's faked, it's government employees. And what is their qualification for getting the role in the PSYOP? It's not acting talent. No, it's security clearances, blood oaths. They're so corrupt that they're allowed to work in this capacity. So their talent pool isn't really people who are skilled in the arts. Their talent pool is largely sellouts. So try to make a good movie with a random group of feds and compromised politicians and who knows who else. I mean, where are they drawing from? Now they're probably going to rely on ChatGPT to do a lot of their scripts. Yeah, the DMV employees of the film industry. Exactly. Freemason World Order says, this reminds me of the original Total Recall movie where Douglas Quaid is given a fake life and a wife to keep him inside it. Okay, so I had noticed years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, that the word legend is consistently associated with death-faking rappers. And death-faking is good for record sales. And look what it's done for Charlie Kirk. His Instagram has got like 15 million more subs. Like at least. But I was looking into the word legend, and I'm like, legend is consistently used. So I did a search on Perplexity. I'm like, does legend have any connotation in the intelligence agencies, in intelligence work, in spycraft? And it turns out that people with completely manufactured IDs, fake histories, fake families who are planted in society to live a normal life and blend in Russia, they're referred to as legends. Like, so your legend is your backstory, which is fake. It's your fake life. And legends never die. No, they don't die. Legends fake die. Charlie Kirk was a legend. I don't even think his kids were real. I don't think his parents are real. Whenever you look at him and his children, it's awkward. He doesn't know what he's doing. There's a lot you could say about it. You could say, well, they don't want to show their faces because he's high profile and he's protecting them. Yeah, sure. It's just kind of conspicuous because their kids are always facing away from the camera. And then they show his parents at the funeral, and his parents, you only see the backs of their heads. So why is it that we only see the backs of the heads of their children and the parents? Andrea says, admitting you're wrong is a superpower. Yeah, exactly. It's like, prove me wrong, please. Charlie Kirk's not dead. Prove me wrong. Nicotrama says, I disagree that these presentations are bad on accident. They have unlimited funds. They print the money. They can make these events better than the movies they wish. I think you're right about that to a large degree, but we also have to consider that they're not bad according to the majority who believe them. See, we're like critics, but we're not just critics. We're connoisseurs. We're PSYOP connoisseurs. We have very high standards. So we're the ones who are looking into the nuance with a critical approach. But the normies, they're fully entertained. They're like, this is a great movie. This is totally real. Like, they're so immersed in it. Like, they don't even doubt it's fake. I mean, they don't even doubt that it's real. They're like, they're so immersed that you can't really say it's that bad. So they don't have to try that hard. Did you see the laughing crisis actor in front of the Utah event? She said, "Oh, Charlie Kirk got shot in the chest and blood started pouring out." She starts laughing. He plunged, he fell forward. He didn't fall forward. He wasn't shot in the chest. Where did she get that from? And there were others too. So the initial witnesses to the event got it wrong. How do you explain that? But do they do it bad on purpose? I don't necessarily think so. I think they're just bad, and they've always been bad, but people weren't noticing before for a lot of reasons. So, for example, if you look at the Oklahoma City bombing, terrible crisis actors, obvious fake blood, people are totally acting. But who is going to notice? Because people watch the news passively. There was no active news consumption at that time in the way we engage it. There was no internet. There was no networking. You could not have a real-time think tank to deconstruct the nightly news at the time of the Oklahoma City bombing. This has only been made possible because of social media. So we're in a very advantageous position for this that no one else had previous. So back then, even if 1 in a million people noticed some discrepancy in the news, who are they going to tell? There was no way you could have consolidated a body of thinkers, i.e. a think tank, on the premise that maybe the news is actually manufacturing stuff. And even if you thought that or suspected it, you'd have nobody to talk to network with, and all of the conspiracy theories at the time would have taken up all the conversation anyway. And all the conspiracy theories operate on the central premise that it's real, but there's a twist. Never it's fake. Nicotrama says, when they add these plot holes, they get us to fight and go down rabbit holes. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm finding this interesting fracture. And look, this is where I'm right again. You know how I said that red pill is actually a subset of J pill? Look at the fracture in the Republicans right now on the Charlie Kirk thing. Turning Point USA, which is not woke right, they're pretty much neocon. The woke right is the conspiracy theory wing. They're saying it was Israel. But the normies are saying, no, it was done by Tyler Robinson because of leftist ideology. So the split here is that the mainstream Republicans agree with the mainstream story. But the ones who go with the conspiracies, the red pill stuff, are also the woke right ones. So Candace Owens, woke right. Somebody else killed Charlie Kirk. Laura Loomer, neocon. Tyler Robinson did it. And stop spreading conspiracy theories because you're going to help him escape justice. All the Turning Point USA people accept the official story. None of them are conspiracy theorists. The only ones who delve into the conspiracy side of it are woke right. And that's because woke right is J pill and red pill is a subset of J pill. So all the conspiracy theorists are not going with the mainstream Turning Point USA version. That's why the conspiracy theorists are lining up with Candace Owens. So Candace Owens is basically doing this. She's passing out J pills covered in red, painted red. So fake red pills. Like, here, conspiracy theorists, here's some conspiracy candy. But it's all leading you into far right-wing politics. Freemason World Order says, I noticed on my local TV they're going to air JAG, CSI, and NCIS nonstop. Is a fake war coming? Probably. So, okay, before we go, on the 9th, Nashville 911 is premiering. If you look at the trailer, it's got some kind of weapons from space, nukes from space, some kind of thing coming in. But it's all about Fire Department 113. The 113 code is all about the Space Needle in Seattle getting it. 113 was the date the One World Trade Tower opened, by the way. And it's Godzilla's birthday. Probably not a coincidence, because Godzilla also pertains to the Kraken and the nuke, which in the series The Tempest, that is a factor. And now another thing, October 14th, Charlie Kirk's birthday. So if you think Kirk's going away and you got Kirk fatigue, Kirkianity just started. Might as well get used to it. So 1014, there's going to be a conflict between the woke right and the woke left. Between, well, even really just between MAGA and the left. Because it's going to be George Floyd's birthday versus Charlie Kirk's birthday. And you see how the leftists are constantly attacking the Charlie Kirk memorials? I mean, they're unhinged about this. And it's just getting started. So the 9th should be an interesting date. I'm just saying. 911, it's called. Nashville 911. And October 9th is, of course, 109. And then 1014, you got both the martyrs. Martyrs on the left, martyr on the right. Angst G says Kirkianity versus Floydianity. Yes. You wouldn't think those two had anything in common. But when you look at it in the frame of the world stage, it makes sense. These are antipodes. These are complete polar opposites. David Icke coined the term opposames because they're basically the same thing, but on the opposite side. Kind of like that one. But anyway, what Freemason World Order suggested about what he sees on his TV, yeah, you're looking at it appropriately. It's programming. If it's on TV, and especially if it represents like a shift, like a trend, if something is trending, then it's preparing you for the next scene on the world stage. And that's one other point that we have going for us. One other thing that we've recognized here is that by recognizing the world stage model, which is not a physical structure, it's the mental simulation, but it's also the timeline. It's the past leading up to now and everything else. But we do have some predictive capabilities. That's why I would go watch movies as they're coming out if they're being hyped. It's like, let's see what's happening next. If somebody had said, hey, the #1 show on Hulu is The Tempest, you should watch it because it's the #1, I would have done so. And I should probably keep doing that because I usually do that. Like I watched The Madness because it was #1. My presupposition is that if it's #1, if it's being promoted, then it's going to have some immediate real world counterpart, as in something fake, something staged. But it's a prediction. Like I predicted the Hulu thing. I didn't know it was that show, but I knew something would be there. Now, if we didn't have a point, if we were not correct, if the meta script concept wasn't an accurate description of how things work, we would not be able to make predictions, accurate predictions with regularity. So the predictive capacity of our model is proof positive that we are in fact correct. Otherwise, you would have to agree that we're all just psychic, and I'm psychic, and we are somehow managing to, I don't know, read the vibes of the universe. Like, no need for woo here. We can keep it mundane and objective. And I could make the point that we are the only objectivist think tank on the world stage engaged in this type of conversation. You think the objectivist society are objective? You think Ayn Rand was an objectivist? No, they were compromised because their objectivism was filtered through the mainstream media. Like Truman in The Truman Show. That guy could never be an objectivist because he's in a subjective world. Diddy got 4 years and 2 months, another 42. Fascinating. I'll have to think about that. I got to ask you, like, is that even real? There was some stuff. What was that movie called Blink Twice that seemed to insinuate the Diddy white parties? They had the snake oil instead of the baby oil. Because the people who are involved in the PSYOP entertainment complex are never going to face real consequences because they could turn on it. They know too much. They've got to be protected. Nicotrama says Diddy is fake, just like everything else. Yeah, there's quite a lot of predictive programming content that suggests that Diddy was gonna serve time. That he was. This is all. I think it's all manufactured. Lean Dion says, just like academics and intellectuals, the most indoctrinated so as to become stupid, ignorant. Okay, so when I say programmed, like when people are programmed, they're not deprogrammed. They're going with the script. If you're unquestioningly accepting the world that's been presented to you, you're going along with the program. Like when you go to a play or a symphony, you're given a program. And the program is the list of things that are going to happen that night in order with time. And if you follow along with the timeline they've given us, you are in fact programmed, like an NPC. You're reading a script. By rejecting the program and looking at it objectively, that's really what I mean by deprogrammed. Like you're no longer framing your worldview with their frame of reference. And you have to list the ways that your frame of reference is different from the mainstream to really grasp this. Like in my world, school shooters are fake, nukes are fake, Christian schools aren't being shot up by Antifa radicals, space junk is fake. The martyrs are fake. I mean, if you go down the list, subtract all those things you don't believe and compare it to the regular mainstream believer. So your world is less populated by hyperstitions. Carl Sagan wrote that book. It was called Demon Haunted World, about superstition. And he was right in describing how people have always existed in a world with bad explanations, false explanations, lies, and misconceptions to explain away gaps in their knowledge. And that's what superstitions had, pretty much done in myths. But it would be a mistake to think that we don't live in a very superstitious world today. But the traditional superstitions have been updated. And I think the better term now is hyperstitions. And the difference being, of course, a hyperstition is reinforced by the system, no longer countered. Nicotrama says, if I say everything is fake, then I give credence to the agent screaming birds aren't real. Yeah, well, maybe not. I think you could explain it. Because you could really, what you're really doing here when you're saying everything is fake that they're showing us, you're actually not wrong. Because let's say a completely honest, truthful, well-intentioned journalist takes a job in the media and they never tell a lie. Well, if they rest upon the entire body of work that media agency has published, they're standing upon an edifice of lies. So they're liars by default. The world stage makes them into liars. So to say everything's fake, like, I get your point. It's not wrong. And you're actually well, I think, within the bounds of logic to say the burden of proof isn't on me. You prove it's not fake. Tell me one event that isn't. And I'm just saying, if you approach like that, they'll bring up something mundane. But just the only qualifier you need is every significant historic event promoted on the mainstream news on a large scale has been staged, planned in advance, and faked. You're actually not wrong about it. But I just don't want to get everything is fake mixed in with the people who don't have a nuanced view, what I call low information disbelievers. So in order to avoid being conflated with the low info disbelievers, we have to kind of have some nuance there. So it's really to distinguish us from them. Because people will say, you guys say everything is fake, as though it's a low intelligence claim. I saw a comment, they said, they were mocking us. They said, the big brains think that Charlie Kirk's shooting was fake because they saw it on TV. It's like, no, we're not saying that. We're saying it's fake because everything has been fake thus far when investigated. So I think we should say everything is fake to provoke, and we can defend it. But if pinned down, we can actually kind of say, well, actually, here's what we mean. Here's the qualifiers. Extraordinary claims. Like, I'll give them this. If the media says the sky is blue, I'll trust them. Andrea says, how long have these things been faked? Look, I'm comfortable saying since the inception of media. I mean, Titanic, fake. Kennedy assassination, fake. RFK, fake. And look at the director, John Frankenheimer. John Frankenheimer, Manchurian Candidate, invented the idea of the mind-controlled assassin. And he was there with RFK when a mind-controlled assassin killed him. So this has been a pattern from the beginning. The idea of media foreshadowing and real-time concurrent programming, that has been standard operating procedure from the beginning. Entertainment has always been entrained. You can even look at science fiction from Isaac Asimov and many others as constituting part of the predictive programming. So it pre-existed televised news. Violent Pengon says everything is re-scripted. It's all recycled. This is JFK all over again in so many ways. And that's a hoax indicator. Real life shouldn't immediately or exactly follow some other event in like such a repeatable, observable pattern. Like it's too predictable. It's too much of a template. Like reality's not a template, but we have these cookie cutter events. But this is one other point before we go. The reason why we're noticing patterns is because we've created not an echo chamber, but we've created a platform, a think tank, and because of social media. If we weren't talking to each other about what we're seeing, the media would have a one-to-one relationship with everybody. Everybody gets the news with no discussion. It's just direct download. But we have this ability now to share information, to show clips. Imagine if we weren't able to capture the news and watch it again and share the clips. We would be lost. We'd live in a world of hearsay. Like, oh, Kirk, like, you didn't even see the JFK assassination on film for 12 years. So imagine 11/22/1963, that happens, and how are you not going to believe it? You didn't see it to dispute it. You don't have enough information to say it looked fake. The best you could do is, it was a patsy, somebody else did it. So what we have now is a position where we're able to real-time criticize content, share content, look closer. Andrea says, since the printing press. Yeah, that's an interesting question. It makes me think about myths. And someone asked me about this earlier, and I brought up the historian Polybius, who wrote about how superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state, admitting that the gods are just constructs, that the terror of gods is used to control the masses who are fickle and need to be bossed around by terror. So it's as old as religion. Media is the new religion. All right, well, this has been great. We covered a lot of ground. I want to say thanks, everyone, for the generous support. It won't be long before we are in a studio. A lot of upgrades are being prepared because we're entering a very interesting phase. The damage control agents are trying to deal with media skeptics who figured out about the entrainment between entertainment and fake events. They know we know that they know that Kirk's not dead. And that's a problem. So it's going to get more entertaining as we ramp up the intensity here. We have a legitimate challenge to the status quo in Trutherville. There's a potential here for a real marketplace disruption, and we're going to spearhead it. And what we're doing right now is we're marshaling our forces. We have to get everybody on the same sheet. We all have to look at this from the off-world stage perspective. I don't know what critical mass is or critical raft. We have 2,000 subs on YouTube, but how many of us in the know, on the same sheet, with the same essential lexicon will it take to be able to, effectively neutralize the controlled opposition in significant ways and cause them to do, I don't know what kind of damage control that they're going to have to do, but it should be fun because we're in an advantageous position. We have access to information. We have an understanding that is higher than these low-level propagandists who are maintaining very specific platforms and guardrails and narratives that they can't deviate from. So I'm just interested really in testing the integrity of their system. We're going to do a stress test. We are stress testing the guardrails that keep Trutherville in place. Etheric Bliss says that, or they will just get better and streamline efforts because it's being noticed and detailed. Yeah, so we're one step ahead. I put out handbook for the recently deprogrammed, knowing that they are going to improve the quality to where you won't be able to visually deconstruct it. So we're one step ahead because we can deconstruct these things blindfolded. And it's all based on our understanding of metascript. Sync Kid says, if these world stage role players come in and out of the limelight, where they're coming from and existing, where are they going to? Good question. Good question. Look at the Challenger survivors. Or look at Timothy McVeigh working for the FBI right now. Charlie Kirk's probably going to have a job somewhere, some FBI office. He'll get a nose job probably. Just pushing pencils, something boring. I don't know. I mean, I think he just sold his house for millions of dollars like 8 months ago. I'm sure they have somewhere to go. What's up, Pippi? Thanks for joining. But where are they going? That's a good question. But I brought up legends because it's well within the capacity of the intelligence agencies to extract people from the matrix and repurpose them. In that movie Utopia that was referenced by Tim Pool, there was an actual place, the Utopia, like Crisis Actor Island, like it was a separate society, and their job was to influence the mainstream society through psychological operations. Mango says, what's going to happen next? Honestly, whatever happens, like my pulse isn't going to go up. They could nuke the West Coast. I mean, it's good for business. Charlie Kirk has been the best thing to happen to the IPS since Nipsey. As far as psyops go, I'm like, thank you, Saint Charlie Kirk. We have 2,000 subs now. But more importantly, he's brought a lot of auto hoaxers out of the woodwork where we can address them directly via Twitter. Like I'm building up a list. I'm going to send a bunch of books to potential guests because I think there's a lot of people that, like I said, we want people who are 80% of the way self-extracted. Those are the ones we want. And you notice that the more people we have looking into it, the better intel we get and the more entertaining it gets. And I'm not doing this for entertainment per se, but the fact that it's entertaining is actually helpful. It's not like it's detrimental to your mental health to be a skeptic about propaganda, to be slow to believe. No, it's bad for your mental health to be an auto-believing, triggered fool. So Mango asks, what's going to happen next? Well, if you want a clue as to what's going to happen next, watch whatever's popular, whatever's promoted. Hulu, The Tempest, I'm going to go watch another episode tonight. You can actually get some foresight. You can actually get some premonitions, if you want to call them that. You can be psychic, basically. This is talked about in Leave the World Behind, produced by the Obamas. They call it the curve. The guy's talking about how they were talking about a mass agreed upon collective delusion. This is that Julia Roberts character. A mass agreed upon collective delusion. A mass agreed upon delusion. That sounds like the world stage. And the one character she's talking to, who I think represents Obama, who would be a meta scripter, and that movie Leave the World Behind had copious predictive programming, noted by media, in fact. Even the author of the book was said to be prescient because it seemed to predict 2020. But the conversation was about the curve, that there was a way you could read what's to come if you knew what you were looking at. And it was kind of alluding to an understanding of our manufactured history. Lily Bell says, no way Miss Arizona would marry that smile and hairline. CK has a gummy smile, probably fake like his hairline. No, I don't think that's the case. Millions of dollars, 6'5". I think that pretty much is all you would need. And he was connected to Trump, and I think it was a arranged marriage anyway. Violet Pengon says, people that I'm explaining to are happy not to have to worry about the stressful news. Yeah, I'm content to leave the blue pillars in their bliss. Why get them involved? Because if they do get agitated, they're just going to be led into the red pill nightmares. It's like, let them have their peace. No need to get deeper into the mind war. Those of us who found our way into Trutherville were probably not at peace anyway. Like, I wasn't at peace with the mainstream. If I was, I wouldn't have looked deeper. Like, I was like, okay, I can sense these big lies. I don't know where it's coming from. My intuition was too active. And the red pill is there to nullify you. And it just radicalizes you. And if you didn't deviate from the program, the red pill path would have taken you into alt-right politics. Now you're a Trump voter. And you're mad at Trump because he's not extreme enough. And now you hate everybody. And it's just, you get conscripted into the mind war if you pay too much attention. There weren't any alternatives. Exactly, Nicotramus. There's no path to the white pill that does not go through the red pill. Yep, I was definitely there. Sync Kid says, feeling more and more like we're in a contained petri dish, like in the show Silo. Yeah, look at Westworld, the program where the synths are. There's a table with this map on it, and it's like this, kind of like a little domed area, but it's like this table represents the Westworld. And it reminds me very much of Hunger Games, where the elite are looking around this table and they can influence it and add things that happen on the stage where the characters are. Or Clash of the Titans, where the gods stand around a circular table and they can move the people around like game pieces. I think that's kind of how it is. The Truman Show. Nicotrauma says, we are fish in a fish tank, QOC. Oh, QOC. Quantum of Consciousness did a pretty good take on the connections between the assassination of Lincoln and Kennedy. So many things between those two mirrored. exactly 100 years apart. There's a whole laundry list of these things. It's ridiculous. So somebody had asked earlier, how far back does this go? Well, now we can point back to the Lincoln assassination. So it goes further back than modern media, that's for sure. Anyway, this has been great. My phone's about to die. We're just about hitting 3 hours. So we will continue this conversation tomorrow, and I'll see you all in Discord. Thanks again, everyone, for the generous support. Again, this think tank is driven by participation. It's not just the financial support, but it's also the thoughts, the thinking that goes into it, the research. We are crowdsourcing from the most informed, situationally aware media critics that there are. We've consolidated quite a group here. What's up, Cake Crash? Here is your wrench. I like your avatar. All right, have a good evening.